So our next speaker is Dr. Lyric Jorgensen from the Office of Scientific Policy at NIH. Continuing our theme of data science, taking a NIH-wide view here. So Dr. Jorgensen is the Deputy Director of the Office of Science Policy at NIH. She earned her bachelor's degree in psychology at Denison University and her PhD from the Graduate Program for Neuroscience at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where she conducted research in neurodevelopment with a focus on learning and memory systems. Prior to joining the Office of Science Policy, she was a senior science policy advisor and analyst under the Deputy Director for Science, Outreach, and Policy, and assisted in the creation of new high-impact science and policy initiatives such as the BRAIN Initiative and the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences. She's also a AAAS member and a technology fellow and has received numerous awards in recognition of her accomplishments and service. In her current position, she provides senior leadership in the development and oversight of cross-cutting biomedical research policies and programs considered to be high priority to NIH and the U.S. government in general. Most recently, she was also the Deputy Executive Director of the White House Cancer Moonshot Task Force in the Office of the Vice President during the Obama administration. Dr. Jorgensen will talk to us today about the draft NIH policy for data management and sharing. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jorgensen.
Great, thank you so much for those introductions. Just wanted to make sure everyone can hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Great, thank you. And thank you for having me here today to talk to you about the data sharing efforts within NIH. As mentioned, the draft NIH policy for data management and sharing, which has been out on the streets for a little while now. So I'm happy to talk to you all about this today. So before I really get into the meat of the policy itself, I wanted to talk to you again, the impetus of why we are really interested in having a data sharing policy across all of the institutes and centers at NIH. I think most of you in the room are probably fully aware that data sharing is an important endeavor for scientists, and that enables validation of scientific results. It allows for analyses that is strengthened by combining data. We're finding the ability to combine things like biomedical imaging and residency information for toxicology and EHRs all provides a unique treasure trove of information when combined in unique ways. Data sharing also allows us to reuse hard to generate data, so data that is precious or limited in quantities. And also it allows us to accelerate future research inquiries without having to unnecessarily duplicate previous studies. So it's important for scientists, and I think the scientific community has been well aware of the value for some time. I also want to highlight that it's a really important concept for the public as well. As you know, NIH is nearly a $40 billion agency. The data sharing shows our stewardship over the taxpayers' investment in biomedical research by fostering transparency and accountability. And maximizes research participants' contributions. This is an important thing that we have learned a lot about, that research participants expect that their data will be used to advance knowledge and advance science. And so to the extent that we can maximize those expectations or investments in those expectations, the better. So I think you all are probably familiar, given your role as council members, that NIH has demonstrated a really, really long commitment to making the research results and accomplishments available to the public. For example, we have the first comprehensive NIH-wide policy on data sharing in 2003. At that time, we established expectations that all research data from large awards, predominantly over 500,000, will be shared. That policy has been in effect since 2003, and we continue to learn a lot of lessons from those efforts. We also have really placed an emphasis on data that are considered of extreme value for scientific sharing, such as genomic data. We have the NIH-wide Genome-wide Association Studies Policy and the Genomic Data Sharing Policy, which establishes our expectations for sharing large-scale genomic data. We also have policies around clinical trials information. Many of you are probably familiar that there's not only a regulation that FDA and NIH implement to ensure clinical trials are reported and the results are shared in a timely fashion. But NIH has even taken a complementary approach for all NIH clinical trial data to be shared in a timely fashion. And of course, since 2008, NIH has wanted to make sure that all of the results of the research we fund are shared, not just the data, in the NIH public access policy, which ensures public access to published results of NIH-funded research. And so we can talk about any of those if there's any questions as we move forward. So in thinking about how to move forward with data sharing at NIH, we set in place some goals for what we are trying to achieve. Primarily, we want to foster a culture of data stewardship. We certainly see research community wants to share data. How do we harness that enthusiasm in a way that is manageable, does not place undue burdens, but also advances the science? Two, a goal has to recognize that all scientific data should be managed, but not all data may be necessary to validate and replicate findings. And this will probably come up when we discuss this in a bit, that NIH is trying to be flexible and recognizes, again, that not every single piece of data generated must be shared with the scientific community. And so how to sort out what that means is going to be an important part moving forward. We also want to make sure we have effective data management and sharing principles consistent with FAIR principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable principles. Again, because data shared that is not findable or accessible has potentially limited value and utility for the research community to reuse and make sense of. And we also want to make sure we provide a flexible framework for the breadth, size, and diversity of scientific data. This is really an important component for NIH with its nearly $40 billion investment. We have all sorts of data that are collected, the size of the data, where it can be stored. All of this diversity really needs to be accounted for in a policy because one size does not fit all for the various data types. And finally, any policy that we were to draft has to respect the autonomy and privacy of research participants. We obviously want as much data shared as possible, but need to understand that human data are precious and need to respect the confidentiality and protection of that data as appropriate. These are the goals of a policy that we have been thinking about over the course of the last few years. We first outlined our interest in developing a data sharing policy in a strategic plan provided to Congress, and then actually went out to the research community several years ago with these policy principles to get buy-in from the community to see that we were headed in the right direction. And then from these principles, we pulled together an actual draft policy that was released back in November, open for public comment, that the comment closed in January. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. So NIH's current policy proposal, which again is a draft policy proposal that is open for refinement and revisement as appropriate. But under the current proposal, the scope, all research funded or conducted in whole or in part by NIH that results in the generation of scientific data. Scientific data is defined as the factual information needed to report on the study. So we are not talking about biospecimens here, which is an important caveat to mention. Also importantly, this policy affects intramural research and extramural research. It's a comprehensive policy for all NIH investment in research. As mentioned, the scientific data is the recorded factual material accepted in the scientific community. This is for the replication of research findings. The important part of this policy, again, is that data should be shared. We want to make sure that this information, regardless of whether or not it's published or not, makes it into the community. And we all know that a lot of publications right now rely on significant findings, but data in negative findings are just as important as those in new findings for publication. So the definition of scientific data is meant to encompass that. Here's the meat of the policy proposal that we'd like to discuss with you today. If you recall, a hallmark of this policy is really to be flexible. So what we are asking in our draft policy is that the researchers, when applying for NIH funding, submit a data management and sharing plan, which I will refer to as the plan moving forward, outlining how scientific data will be managed and shared. And then, of course, compliance with the policy would be judgment of whether or not the researcher actually followed the plan as outlined. So let's talk a little bit more about these plans for a minute. As mentioned, these are intentionally flexible in design, recognizing that researchers have a variety of scientific goals, different types of data they would like to collect, different lengths of study, and so on. And thus, in the plan, we are asking researchers to propose how they intend to manage and share data, including which data will be preserved and shared for other use. This plan should also outline how research participants' privacy protections are in place, privacy rights, confidentiality, and may include the consideration of factors that may limit data sharing. So this is also an important point. If there are rules, regulations, or laws that prohibit data sharing, those should be documented as a source of reason why data may not be shared. And this is also true for considerations around tribal laws or tribal nations in terms of paying attention to what those policies and legal issues look like. Another important component of our policy proposal is that these plans, when the researcher submits them at the application phase, might change over time. As the study is underway and researchers begin to collect their data or determine other factors that affect the collection of data, plans may need to be updated. So throughout the life of the award, with approval by the NIH Institute Center Office, these could be updated to more accurately reflect what the current state of the data sharing plans are. So I believe I alluded to a few minutes ago about the policy the proposal for being submitted with the application to the NIH. These would be reviewed by program staff within the Institute. There were conversations about whether or not they should be part of peer review. I think that at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that the consistency in review of draft plans or plans submitted to the NIH was consistent across all of our institutes and centers. So having a cadre of program staff review these for the applicability to their specific study made the most sense. So submitting just in time reduces burden on the extramural community to ensure that they will be most likely funded before submitting this information. Plans will be assessed by NIH program staff, as I mentioned, before awards are determined and funded. And importantly, the plan compliance will be a part of the term and condition of award and will be considered when determining future funding decisions at some point in time. So these are the nuts and bolts of the policy proposal that has been out for consideration. We recognize it is intentionally flexible to, again, allow for the various needs of the research community. So to help researchers think through this proposal, we've also released some draft guidance to help people think through the elements of the proposal. And the first element that we've shared with you all is the elements of a plan. So, of course, we get a lot of questions of, we're allowed to give a plan. What is that? Is that 1 page, 30 pages? How do we understand what the NIH needs to make a judgment? And so we are recommending roughly a 2-page proposal that addresses the following elements: the type of data to be collected, any related tools, software, or code, the standards that will be used for data collection, how the data will be preserved, what will be the access, and the associated timelines for preservation and access. This is one of the questions we get a lot about, is how long should data be made accessible? We also encourage you to discuss how data sharing agreements will be made, licenses, or any other use and limitations. And finally, how the oversight of data management will be conducted throughout the life of the data sharing plan. This is the first set of guidance we put out for comment. And then second, and one that is probably of the second greatest interest, if not more, is how to pay for data sharing and data management. NIH recognizes that this is an additional ask of the research community. We do expect that data is managed and shared, but understand having quality data shared and managed and accessible, as described earlier, will likely have some additional costs associated with it. So NIH has proposed some guidance indicating what costs might be allowable under an NIH application. So proposed are reasonable allowable costs that would be included in the budget request. So these costs could be for curating the data and developing supporting documentation, again, to make sure that the data is of high quality and accessible for others to be able to understand how it was collected. Preserving and sharing data through established repositories. And then finally, local data management considerations. So these were some of the ideas that were proposed as acceptable costs. Worth mentioning, costs cannot be considered in a budget request are infrastructure costs, typically included in indirect costs, or costs associated with the routine conduct of research. Obviously, when generating the research or generating the data would have been done anyway and is not considered an extra cost of doing business here. These are the two guidance documents that have been out for comment, and as mentioned, the comment period closed in January 10th, and we got over 200 public comments on these proposals, all really helpful, and we are sorting through now how to revise the current policy proposal if appropriate. I also want to talk to you about some of the related activities that we are doing along these lines. Is we are also working with tribal communities to think through how to further engage tribal nations in biomedical research. Obviously, the aim is to have the research we fund support the diversity of the country, and how can we improve health of all of our nation and make sure it is equitable. So we've been working with tribal nations to figure out how their thoughts on a policy and how to engage them, and also to figure out how maybe to develop some guidance that is more appropriate for researchers working with tribal communities and to consider their local policies and requirements. Those are some of the other ongoing activities, as well as working with our data science office to make sure that as we move forward in any policy efforts, we are considering infrastructure that accompanies it. We recognize that this policy requires the availability of repositories, requires the ability of seamless deposition of data and access of data. And so part of NIH is actually really working on how we can modernize our data management ecosystem, and it has released several pilots to make sure that we have nimble repositories in place. So all that said, as mentioned, we are in the consideration of feedback received. We solicited community input back in 2018 on these initial policy goals. We developed the draft policy off of those values back in 2019, and then put out our draft policy in 2020. Our next steps will be to finalize the NIH policy for data management and sharing after considering all the comments and feedback we've received to date from both external members and internal NIH members, with the goal of the end of this fiscal year. Of course, that'll depend on the nature of the comments received and the feasibility of integration. And then the policy would go into effect. Oh, I think there's a typo in here. I apologize. The target date would be 2022, recognizing that after the policy goes into effect, we will need a window of time that allows institutions to understand the needs, the resources, and plan for implementation. So we imagine there would be a 2-year lag date before the policy were actually to go into effect to allow the community to understand the requirements. So again, I apologize for that typo in there. And then finally, that's a pretty fast and brief overview, but looking forward to the discussion and questions on where we are and where we intend to go.
Okay, thank you. We have plenty of time for questions from council members. This is something that okay, had some feedback there. This is something that you all will be continuing with in years to come. So if you have any questions, please ask Dr. Jorgensen. Jose?
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. The question that I have is, what's going to be the weight or the impact of having a data management and sharing plan in proposals, whether that's going to be built into the review process of a proposal? The question that I'm asking this is that some institutions are better than others in assisting faculty with data management and data sharing. So could this negatively impact folks that don't have the infrastructure to do so well with data management and archiving, et cetera?
Thank you for that question. This was definitely a factor in considering when the plan should be reviewed. As mentioned, the policy does require that a plan be submitted to NIH, but it will not be in peer review. It will be reviewed by program staff, which allow the opportunity for a dialogue with NIH and the NIH staff to help the people submitting the plans really get to an acceptable plan. Our goal isn't to disencourage people from submitting or from data sharing or from getting an award. It is to help them figure out how to do this responsibly. So having a dialogue with program staff can help bring people into a good shape with a plan. And I think that that will be a really good strategy for those who have less experience in this space.
Okay, yeah, Robin.
Well, kind of related to that point, maybe it's downstream, but in terms of the compliance side, I mean, I see a nightmare of trying to make sure that people followed through with their data sharing plans, and how will that actually be enforced, particularly since there was a punitive component listed in your slides.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and one that we have specifically requested feedback on. Obviously, the period of award likely have ended by the time the data is ready to be shared, and so how to ensure that the data are shared and have enforcement. We are looking into mechanisms to be able to track how data is shared and use it in future funding decisions. Again, the goal is to change the culture around data sharing and not be punitive. So the hope is to work with the investigators to make sure the data gets shared in a meaningful way and then track that long term. At some point, it will likely be involved in future funding decisions, but in the beginning part, I think we are going to do our best for education and outreach to help people comply with that. We're also, for the record, trying to figure out how to make the plan have appropriate identifiers for where the data will be. Again, those FAIR principles for us to easily find the data and be able to document how it's been shared to be in compliance with the policy.
Further questions? Dr. Wright, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I have a question about the costs of data sharing and who bears those costs. As a researcher, for me to share a data set where people ask for variables and to avoid PHI and to anonymize it, which sometimes is not possible because addresses are part of environment, but there are costs to that and grants end. So has there been any discussion of how those costs will be covered?
Absolutely, it is a routinely asked question, and to figure out how to do this with the appropriate justifiable costs has been a large discussion at NIH. That is one why we are proposing allowing data sharing costs to be built into the proposal or in the budget proposal, which can include staff for people who curate data, because again, just generating high quality data and managing and sharing it also takes extra effort. So the various needs to be able to make sure it is accessible is an allowable cost that we are proposing. We are also exploring what the costs are of data management sharing. So for instance, the National Academy of the Sciences is currently undertaking a study to determine what are those costs associated with data sharing, how much are they, what is the range, to help really inform how to develop appropriate budgets and estimates for data sharing.
But just to follow up, I'm referring to costs that might be incurred 5 or 6 years after a grant ends.
That's an excellent question, and that is something the conversation around in the upfront budget discussion about, is it a one-time fee to deposit a repository, or is it a yearly cost to continue managing the data? And so part of the conversation is how long should the data be managed and shared? Is it indefinite? Is it time limited? And what are the associated costs with that, and how to build that into a budget proposal up front, for instance, when the grant ends? And so that's a conversation that we are having to figure out appropriate mechanisms to allow for that.
We're going to come down to Ersima. Did you have a question? And then we'll come back to this.
for your presentation. So coming from an environmental justice perspective, I work with a lot of tribes and border communities on the U.S.-Mexico border. How would you balance access to information to the community for decision-making and confidentiality?
That's an excellent question, and this is one of the conversations we're having with the tribal nations as well, recognizing that tribal nations are sovereign government-to-government relationships with their own unique laws. This is, again, why the proposal anyway, is to have the researcher describe how they manage to share data, or they plan to share data, both with unique considerations or potential limits on how data are being shared. Again, we strive for the default to be all data are shared, but recognize if all data are to be shared, participants will not participate in research. That is actually thwarting the goals to begin with. So we are working to, again, with the researchers to figure out how to do this in a way that balances the ethical constraints as well as the need to share data. And this is why we're trying to develop guidance for researchers, but it'll be part of the plan to determine, or the researchers who know the communities and the communities they're working with, to help propose how to balance those issues.
I don't know, Katrina, you want to go first and then? Okay, Katrina, did you have a question?
Thank you for the presentation, and I know we've been thinking about this for a long time, but hearing you just made me think of this in a different way. So kind of different idea that may be too late to introduce, but this reminds me of the conversation we've been having about the report back of individual participants' research results. And that's generally thought of as being folded into research subjects protection. But as you talk about this structure of coming up with a plan that's submitted in just in time, it has a couple commonalities. The first is it's an opportunity to share ethical guidelines and make really clear expectations of how this process is going to take place. The second is that it guides you in thinking through what are the costs of doing this sharing. And the third is thinking about post-project and some sort of structure for when dealing with costs and interactions that happen after the grant. So I would just encourage you to think about the opportunity of using this moment to fold in some guidelines for report back and sharing of data with the participants into this part of the process.
That is a really excellent point. Thank you for raising it. Definitely not too late to integrate it into our efforts and data sharing, right, and making sure how the research participants who've engaged are also respected and receive information about the studies they've participated in. So as you highlighted, one of the real goals of this policy is not necessarily to be punitive, but to have researchers prospectively plan for the components of their study of how to manage and use their data. And that's the real goal. And what you raised is exactly part of that.
Okay, thank you. Terry.
This question relates primarily to the submitting of data and database information to scientific journals and publishers and signing of copyrights. To what extent does this conflate with our right to do this and our responsibility to report these data?
Thanks. Sorry, I keep muting myself so that I don't create feedback. So that is an excellent question regarding copywriting, and we are working across the federal government to coordinate repositories and repository access. We do include in our proposal the ability to limit data sharing based on copyright. Again, though, most data shouldn't be copyrighted. It's not something that we typically we don't see as often. But again, if there are licenses or agreements that prohibit data sharing, that is something that can be outlined in the plan as an exception to sharing.
Further questions from council members, staff? If not, Dr. Jorgensen, thank you for that presentation. Very illuminating and educational. Thank council members for their informed questions. If there aren't any further questions, then we'll just move on to the agenda.
Thank you all very much. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to working with you in finalizing a policy that works for the community.
If I yell, or, okay, there you go. Our next speaker. So, good morning so far. I wanted to first thank Dr. Jorgensen for her nice overview of the NIH grant management policies there, and to thank Charles over here for giving us such a good perspective on the NIH data sharing world as well. Rick had mentioned that there have been a lot of IT enhancements to NIHS, and called out David Fargo with his coworkers, and he and Charles have done a great job of setting up the infrastructure for doing data sharing here at NIHS. But this afternoon, for the rest of the afternoon, we're going to focus on the extramural program and what we can do to better address data science questions and how to appropriately apply the principles that Charles and Dr. Jorgensen have laid out. So we can get the most out of our data that we have invested through our extramural investments. This raises a different set of challenges for us versus intramural. We have, a limited amount of control. Once we give the money, we have some control, but for the most part, we kind of need to wire this in up front. So I'm going to show some examples of our programs and activities where we have tried to use data science and put them into our programs. I need to say at the beginning that these are much more complex programs than you're going to hear from me, and I'm just waiting for program officers who run these programs to attack me with pitchforks and torches when I start talking about when I try to simplify their programs. So I also want to mention that as with most of the big programs we do in DERT, these are cross-branch activities. And a lot of people are involved in them, and we attack these things as a group. And in fact, I need to call out Cindy Lawler, Chris Duncan, Amanda Garten, Astrid Howden for helping me put this presentation together today. I don't want to be amiss with that. All right, so I can do the next slide. So I just put this up here. This is drawn from the data science strategic plan for NIH. And I just want to put it up here as a way of emphasizing that as we move forward, we're trying to be consistent with the NIH data standards and data strategic plan. A lot of the points that Charles lined out for being needed for intramural research do apply for extramural research. And a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today will fall into, everything I will talk to will fall into one of these objectives from the NIH strategic plan. I stole this slide from Charles shamelessly, and I just put it back up here to say that in the extramural community, we also want to make sure our data are fair. And I won't spend much time here because Charles covered that so well. But as Charles alluded to, we face a whole lot of challenges, and Dr. Jorgensen pointed out many of these as well. And I like what Charles said about this is a new area of research. There's no guidebook here. So we're kind of moving ahead a bit in the dark. But so we're, again, as I mentioned earlier, looking for your input on how to move this forward. Charles spent an amount of time talking about consistent formats and vocabulary. That's always a challenge. Dr. Jorgensen mentioned cultural issues. She focused, I think, on the researcher's perspective, where research in the past has been done mostly to answer a specific research question without maybe too much of an eye toward making the data usable by other people or adhering to different data standards. But there's also a cultural issue related to from the perspective of the participants who may be hesitant to give their data to researchers but for security or privacy reasons. We've had several conversations this morning about the idea of cost. Charles said that fair is not cheap, and this is something we have to deal with. A lot of institutions don't have the resources to support, for instance, an infrastructure to keep and maintain data long-term, such as after when the project is over. And institutions as well as us have to think about a balancing between supporting the generation of new cutting-edge, read that expensive data on the one hand, and then maintaining biorepositories or handling data management issues on the other. And of course, Charles mentioned this, and we'll talk about it again in a little while, is an insufficient data science expertise. I want to focus a little bit on this last one, which is the diversity of data types and research topics. We have I think maybe more than most ICs, a very broad range of research topics, research data that we generate. Looking around the room here is a microcosm of the research we support, and as our research, data generators. We have medical data, we have community data, we have genomic data, toxicology, whatever. So we have a wide variety of data that we need to contend with, which does present some formidable barriers for data science, such as operability and harmonization. Just kind of looking back, reminding several years ago, 2012, we released the previous strategic plan. And part of that strategic plan was Goal 7, which is the use of knowledge management techniques to create a collaborative environment for the HS community to again, make best use of their data. If you go to this website at the bottom, you can see what the implementation programs were and what accomplishments were achieved during that time. And of course, the new strategic plan that was released in 2018 also calls out data management with some words that are a little more current and on point, such as data sharing, integration, analytics, and then, of course, the FAIR concepts. Sort of as a result of that exercise at the previous strategic plan, DIRT staff were heavily involved in a number of data science workshops, which I will show here. These provided our staff the opportunity to interact with experts in the field, meet with people from other institutes and agencies, and in general, just to kind of get a better handle on how we might move our data science portfolio forward. Some of these were environmental science specific, such as the Finding Common Language and Finding Common Framework, or Genomics database. And then Superfund Program held a series of 4 webinars on integrating their data, and their data are very diverse, as you'll hear in a little while. And then, of course, we had a meeting here on developing a data science competent workforce. We also sponsored several National Academy meetings looking at environmental health science data and how to handle that. In addition to these, we also participated, several of our staff, in the Big Data to Knowledge, BD2K program. You can see the purpose of this program was to support the development of tools to maximize the utility of big data in biomedical science. Several of our staff were involved in these programs here. Kim McAllister and Michelle Heacock were participating in the Data Centers of Excellence. Cindy Lawler and Astrid Haugen were involved in the Data Standards program. And Carol Schreffler, I believe, was the lead program officer for NIH on the training part of this BD2K, which we'll talk about some more later. And again, these experiences provide us a way of looking at how NIH is handling data at this time. This was 2013, I believe, and with the ideas on how to move our program forward. So I'm going to share some of our data science activities, programs where we used or tried to use data science concepts as we were developing the programs, and they fall generally under kind of 3 categories. One is enhancing data management and sharing. The second one will be how we used data coordination for some of our more collaborative programs, and then finally talk a very small amount about training, because you'll hear more about that as we go on. So regarding data science, logic tells you if you don't know where you are, it's going to be hard to get where you need to be. So in that vein, Chris Duncan led an effort to establish what you might call a baseline of data sharing. He looked at NIEHS-supported publications over a 3-month period in 2015 to see what kind of data sharing or evidence of data sharing there was. Along with a lot of technical issues that they ran across, what they found was that about 15% of NIH-supported publications did some sort of data sharing. The majority of these data were deposited in public data repositories, which we consider a positive thing, with a lot of them going to like the NCBI Geo repository. Similar results were found by other NIH-wide assessments that about 15% of NIH publications in general showed some evidence of data sharing. We're currently in the process of doing this again, looking at 2019 data to update the process to see if we've made any progress since 2015. And we hope soon to be doing kind of the other side of the coin, where we look at for evidence that people or PIs other than the PIs that generated the data are using our NIEHS-supported data. That will be a heavier pull, and good luck to you all as you do it. I think Charles actually mentioned these two RFAs. This again in the area of data sharing. NIH has released 2 program announcements. These two, one to support data repositories and one to support knowledge bases. NIEHS is participating in this PAR, and we would like for you all to submit applications for these U24s. There are 2 receipt dates a year. The first one will be in September of 2020, so you'd have some time to think about it, but we encourage your submission of those applications. But I think we would be naive to think that we could realize the promise of applying data science to EHS data as being something simply saying you have to share your data. It's far more complicated than that. It involves nurturing what we call the entire life cycle of data. This is a diagram from the University of California, Santa Cruz Library that shows one way the data science and data management life cycle. We need to start supporting the parts of the data management plan that come before the sharing to make sure we share things in a proper way. So kind of in that same vein, I want to tell you about a program that we released about a year ago entitled Enhancing Data Management and Sharing in the NIH-Funded Research Grants. This was a supplement program. Only people who had active NIEHS R01 projects were eligible to submit, but the goal was to support integration of new expertise to enhance data project management. It had to be new people, somebody not already involved with the study, and you could pull from a number of areas such as to get this new expertise, such as data architecture, data administration, information science, data science, and data engineering. And of course, we're trying to emphasize the need to make data fair. We released 9 of these awards late fiscal year, September of last year. So we don't have a lot of data that we can show you, but we did want to point out I would just point out one supplement that we did award that illustrates the kind of thing we were looking for. This was a supplement given to Dr. Amin Chin, the University of Cincinnati, in support of the HOME study, that's Health Outcomes and Measures of the Environment. This is the HOME study is a longitudinal pregnancy and birth cohort study looking at the role of low-level lead in early development. So as it seems, the study's been going on for a long time, and they've collected a lot of data on biological samples and biospecimens. But a lot of these data were collected from different labs with different assays, different formats, and different data structures. In addition, they collected measures from participants and their parents at various time points via different sources and platforms. The result, as you can imagine, is somewhat of a data management conundrum. So they applied for this supplement and received it with the idea of to address the current data management by engaging bioinformaticians and application and database programmers to try to develop a better data structure to handle these difficult data questions. So this is one program, one approach we took to trying to address data science issues and data management issues. So one thing I would hope we can talk about later in the discussion later is, will this type of supplement program be a valuable tool for providing supplements for data science efforts to existing grants. We ran this one time. It's paused right now. Based on what we hear today from your recommendations, we can start it up again and continue that program. So while efforts like the supplement program I just described to existing grants is useful, it stands to reason that we might have more ability to strengthen our data science expectations through our solicited programs, ones where we write an RFA and can kind of prescribe the things we want to see. We can, if you will, upfront lay out our data science expectations. What you see here is a very non-exhaustive list of some of our landmark programs and some of our more recent programs where we included data science principles more than just the required data sharing in the RFA. So I'm just looking, beginning here as early as 2003, the Breast Cancer and the Environment Research Program had a coordinating center, and part of their job was to coordinate data sharing mostly among the participants in the program, but also they looked at how to share the data to the public as well. So even that far back. And these other programs, as we've moved forward in time, we have tried to focus on more data science principles being included. I'm going to highlight 3 of these, Target 2, population-based models, and then the cheer here as kind of one thing. Again, I'm just going to touch on these lightly, emphasizing really the data science aspects of them and not the programs in depth. The other 2 programs here, the cohort maintenance and Superfund research program data science, you'll be hearing about after I finish here. Maybe. Okay, so probably our largest landmark program that illustrates the challenges and opportunities for advancing data science in environmental health is our Human Health Exposure Analysis Resource, or HEAR. This was just released last summer, and David Baushaw, who runs the program, gave an program update at the September Council. So I'm just going to briefly mention again some of the points that are relevant to our data science discussion today. So here's an expansion, as you may know, of our CHEER program, which had focused on children's studies. Like CHEER, though, HEAR provides access to an infrastructure for adding comprehensive exposure analysis of biological samples to existing epi and clinical studies that involve human subjects. Excuse me. So this is just kind of an overall graph, and I won't go through it clearly. Just to point out that the HEAR program does take an overview of the exposome, the totality of exposure for human beings. That includes external exposures, which can include chemicals, infectious agents, tobacco, diet, such as that, but also internal exposures from processes like inflammation and from the gut microbiome. So it is taking an exposome approach. HEAR makes use of a wide range of analytical methods for measuring exposures that we have both targeted and what we call semi-targeted biomonitoring or screening approaches that will focus on a smaller number of chemicals. But we also have the untargeted approach, or also referred to as agnostic profiling, where we collect a whole lot of data over a number of chemicals. So as a result, the data generated by the HEAR program have many of the characteristics we usually associate with big data. We have 2 of the 4 V's here. We have volume and we have variety. Hopefully we'll have veracity and velocity as well. To address some of the data science challenges, we included as one of the central components of HEAR a data center, and which among other things provides the public access to a database which will enable qualified reviewers to access the data from the HEAR projects. This is the data portal that is maintained by Mount Sinai, right? Yes, thank you. Where researchers interested in the HEAR program can go and find out what is available in terms of data. Some statistics here on the number of samples and the types of samples can be found at the data portal as well. The data center also provides access to statistical and informatics capability that address challenges of this complex data set, and I believe these are also available publicly, if I'm not wrong. And one of the major things that they had to, that the HEAR program had to address was the issue of common vocabulary, or ontology. So again, this program analyzes samples for existing epidemiology and clinical studies. So as you can imagine, the samples come from a lot of places, analyzed in different ways and with different formats. And so one of the heavy lifts was to try to decide how to address the data format ontology issues. And they are doing this by using the NIH Bioportal? Yeah, Bioportal. So if you have more questions, I recommend that you go to this website, and David, of course, is here, who would be glad to help you out with other questions. Another program that we illustrates our data science approach is the Toxicant Exposures and Responses by Genomic and Epigenomic Regulators of Transcription, or our Target 2 program. That's what this is. The slide shows the goals of the program, and these are just in brief, but in general, the program is designed to explore environmental exposure-induced epigenomic signatures. It's more complicated than that as well, of course. One really unique part of the program is they're looking at not only target tissues where you think the damage might be occurring, such as brain, kidney, liver, that can be difficult to access, and comparing that to epigenetic marks in what you might call surrogate tissue, such as white blood cells, which are much easier to get to see if the biomarkers are conserved between the two types of tissues. Another important goal of this program is to provide the epigenomic data resource, provide a resource for epigenomic data to the research community. The consortium uses next-generation sequencing technology to produce the epigenomic maps and mouse models. They interrogate a variety of different epigenetic marks, including DNA methylation, histone modifications, and chromatin accessibility. They look at multiple time points, multiple chemicals at multiple doses that are associated with a variety of health outcomes such as cancer, cardiopulmonary disease, and so on. The end result is they generate a lot of data, and they're making that data available to the public through their data coordinating center. This shows the data portal that is maintained by their data coordinating center, and it shows some of the types of data that will be accessible by the portal as time goes on and the data are still collected. It also provides access to the Washington University Epigenomic Browser. And the last program I want to touch on is our population-based model organism research for G/E exploration in complex diseases. I think our titles of our RFAs are getting longer and longer every year. Maybe it's just me. So this program is a R1 program. It's not run as a consortium like the other two programs, so there's not a data center or data coordinating center that is coordinating the data. However, when the RFA was written, we made special emphasis to describe the kinds of data management issues that we wanted addressed, including data being shared, but also the use of data standards and milestones to show how data are going to be publicly available. And we encouraged through the RFA that recipients put their data in publicly accessible databases. So again, this is the kind of thing we have been thinking about doing for all of our RFAs. So the last thing I want to mention just briefly, because you'll hear more about it later, is the issue of data science training and workforce development. As I mentioned earlier, we were part of the BD2K training program back a few years ago. It included two components, an intramural investigator and extramural investigator component. I also mentioned the developing a data science competent workforce meeting that we held. And then later on today, you'll hear about a proposal to initiate a new program in training from Chris Duncan. He will present a concept and ask for your approval. So, again, that was quick and it was a little bit high level, but moving forward, what I would like for us to, for you all to consider as we move into our discussion later on is how do we encourage NIH investigators to adopt the best data science practices? And what these programs that I presented are generally targeted toward our RFA programs or activities. How do we make this more flexible to reach additional populations? And what are the next set of challenges and opportunities for data science moving forward as this field emerges? There's value for these programs. There's value in all these types of data and studies being available. We need to understand better how to support data reuse by our grantees. And the other thing, as Dr. Jorgensen referred to, is we also need to think about how to track our success and what success looks like. We need to think earlier in the process, in the beginning of our programs, about what we're going to look at as we evaluate them moving forward, looking how we describe our investments and how to catalog our outcomes. The talks today reflect some of the discussion. Chris will be talking about this more in his concept presentation later on. So with that, I'm going to stop. If you have any questions about any of these programs, I will entertain those now. Again, we have all the program officers that ran all these programs who can answer some of your questions. If not, we can defer some of them to the end of the discussion at the end of the day. Yeah, Lynn.
I am trying to understand as these RFPs are issued and investigators are asked to have a component of their research that would involve creating these data repositories, how...
Hey, Lynn, we're having trouble with your microphone. Could you pause for 1 second? Let's see if we can fix it. You're fading in and out.
I heard that. Should I talk now?
Yeah, try it again.
Try it again. Yep.
I'm curious, and as you issue these RFPs that are encouraging investigators to set up these data platforms, the extent to which the investigators are provided with guidance or standards for example, the syntax that they're to use and so forth. I guess a bit of a beneath this is a little bit of a concern that you're already grappling with a number of different decisions that have been made at different parts of the NAEHS and other parts of the environmental health community. And are you letting more flowers bloom that are then going to need later on to restructure in order to be able to have data that are interoperable with the other data?
Yeah, and you ask a great question, and one that we're grappling with and hopefully we can grapple with later today. In some cases, like where we have our RFAs, we can have discussions about ontologies like we did with here and things like that. For unsolicited applications, that presents, a bigger problem. How the new data management process from NIH will address that is, to me, unclear, but it is a question and one we need to grapple with, and we do want your input on that. Yeah, Brad.
So I still feel like Bob's question remains really unanswered to me. And I mean, we kind of, I think we kind of dance around it, but it seems like where we're most likely to be successful are these with data sharing, is in these situations that you outline, like in here and here, where you have a really formal structure for data sharing set up. And as long as those are maintained, then that data remains available to the community. But it just strikes me as very unclear how the unsolicited applications will really be able to achieve this goal unless there is a concerted effort to house these data centrally at NIH in some way, because that seems to me to be the only way that this really works. And then you have all the ontology issues to deal with, but I just don't see how this possibly ends up meeting the goal of widespread data sharing beyond these targeted areas, unless we can come up with a more centralized structure.
So are you looking more for like an environmental health science data specific repository? I don't know if those exist or not. SEBS we have at NIEHS. I don't know if there are others as well. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
It's an open question, but I mean, Bob and I were chatting about this earlier. I mean, look at the successes of widespread data sharing are like, probably the largest success is probably genetics, where they basically just house the data. So it seems like that concerted effort is the way, if you really want this to work, that's the way it's going to have to
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Questions, comments? Yes, Terry.
Thanks, Pat, for that presentation. You asked whether or not it's time for us to weigh in on the value of the supplements that you gave.
Mm-hmm.
Is it premature, or can you go back through program evaluation branch maybe and actually ask those recipients about how it's going in real time?
And we absolutely will do that. Yes, we will do that, and we can bring you back that data for consideration later. It was just kind of a question related to that modality. If you're offered a supplement, does this sound like something you would be inclined to apply for? Is kind of what I was asking. Again, ways to provide resources to people who already have programs going on and trying to get them to use more data sharing, more data management, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I was particularly focusing on the relatively modest amount that's provided in that supplement relative to the job that's being asked.
And that would be another question. Do these need to be, do we need to put more investment? Just in general, I mentioned and so did Dr. Jorgensen, the concept of balance between funding new research and funding data management resources. So yeah, it's a perfectly good question. Further questions, comments? If not, I'm going to get my cheat sheet, and I'm going to introduce our next presenter, who is Kim Gray. Kim's from the Population Health Branch in DERT. Which one?
And it says break next. Do you want to take a break?
My bad. I don't have my, I'm sorry.
Kim
Don't.
go?
Yeah. What do I have, a 15-minute break?
15-minute break.
Okay, let's take a 15-minute break. Sorry, I don't have my agenda with me. Thank you. Thank you. Our next presenter, as I was saying a minute ago, is Dr. Kim Gray from the Population Health Branch in DRT. She's going to tell us about the Cohort maintenance program that has been running for some time, and she's going to give you an update on that and ask for your feedback at the end of her presentation. Thank you.
Don't think I'm on. Now I'm on. Here we go. Good afternoon, Is that a little loud? Oh. I'm going to stand back here a little bit. My name's Kimberly Gray. I'm in the Population Health Branch, an epidemiologist. And we put together this program back in 2016, maintain and enrich resource infrastructure for existing environmental epidemiology cohorts. I'm going to just give you an overview of what that R24 program looked like for some of you council members who weren't here. Give you the goals and objectives and the timeline of the RFAs that have been released to date, and a little bit of overview on some of the awards. We have the RFA that we originally posted, then we revised that RFA. I'll go over a few of the grantees and cohorts that have been funded to date, give you some highlights on the outreach and data activities, and talk to you about our program management and coordination plan and future steps. So in 2015, we give a concept clearance to really talk about the challenges we were having with some of our cohorts, really just talking about the investments, the money, the time, and the effort of the PIs and their staff to develop them, implement them, and then maintain them. And we knew really the initial results really didn't come within the 4 or 5 years of the grant period. They were coming in around 6 and 7 when the data was being cleaned. So we really didn't have a sustainable model in-house to ensure the continuity of the data collection, especially for those in looking at susceptible windows of exposure, and the follow-up of the subjects during key milestones, and also to really look at the short and the long-term effects. And then we also had, not a requirement, but it was essential for us to be actively engaged with our community. So we couldn't really tell our community, pause, we'll get right back to you when the grant period ended. So we had some continuity for our community and some responsibility to them for the engagement as they are waiting for answers and some of the research results. So the implications were the scientific challenge to the R01 for cohort maintenance. And then the competitive nature of the resources for science versus infrastructure up at review. And then we had this issue in review, as some of you all know, the legacy cohorts were seen as ambitious and not focused, or just adding another couple of years to it. And then at the Institute ourselves, as we try to patch up those short-term problems with funding, we use the bridge support, but that's not sustainable and it's scarce. So for us at NIEHS, we noticed we had multiple grants using the same cohort, or I should say multiple grant applications trying to use the same cohort. It was really a reactive management style for us to try to keep those cohorts intact. We had a balance of legacy cohorts and new cohorts, and that balance, and where did we shift our priorities, especially as we looked at raise to pays as a possible solution. And then overall, and we had this discussion with Linda, was this loss of investment. So the goals of the R24 program was really to provide stability to those cohorts, supporting the infrastructure to retain the trained field personnel that you've established. We knew that was essential. Continue longitudinal follow-up of the participants and keep that data in collection. Follow up, as I said, the participants, and preserve the integrity and quality of the specimen collection. So we decided to create this opportunity to stabilize the funding and opportunities for data preparation, and a structure back then in 2015 to really facilitate and ensure data sharing. So this was really one of our first RFAs out to really look at how we could ensure that our community has greater freedom to pursue new and interesting research directions and not worry about maintaining the cohort. So here the timeline of the 3 RFAs that we released. I'm not really going to go on to detail here, just to kind of give you that in November 2016, we had 6 awards. We had a set aside for about $2.5 million. So these were small and nimble. They were about $250K direct. We released the notice of change because the first set of applications that we had were all kind of asking for different things and really didn't understand where we were going, what we meant by data science. So we put some clarifications in that. And then basically in the last RFA, we just had to actually clean the RFA and start with all the new language because a lot of people didn't see the notice of change. So I'll go over some of those changes with you right now, but it was a $2.5 million program. We've released it 3 times. We're still pending awards on the last set of the RFA any day now. So this is what the RFA looked like. We had 2 components, activities for maintaining the cohort, and then we described the other one as enriching the resource of the infrastructure. And we give you a lot of examples of activities that we thought were going to be responsive. The only requirement in this RFA is that you had to have research infrastructure activities, more like getting your data ready for data sharing. So if you remember, this is 2016, CHEER is being launched, NCS is coming offline. We knew the data needed to be available or usable to others, not just with inside the cohorts themselves. So this was kind of our focus right here was, if you don't want to follow up your cohort, you're managing going in a new direction, at least this is something for you to start really thinking about these infrastructure activities, one of them being data sharing. A lot of confusion in that, so we cleaned it up and we took these elements of data preparation within the cohort, specimen preservation, validation of the exposure and health outcomes, and we moved that up to cohort maintenance and related activities. So the new RFA, the last one that was released, was clear. You could do these types of activities, cohort maintenance related, but you must do something in 2. So that what we included was implementation, improve the QA and QC plan, enable data discovery and integration. So we got a little bit clearer here, and that's also from the help of Chris Duncan. And format and deposit individual level de-identified data. And then we really talked about some of the grants were ready to look at data visualization and big data analytics. So we had a nice consensus, clear cut what we wanted to see. It was encouraged, not required. And so now I'm going to show you some of the awards. This is the first cadre of grants that we were awarded in 2016. And then we had the second group that was in 2017. And these groups, this group here is a little different. Like I said, this would be the A1s and new that actually saw the notice of change. So we still had a little bit disparity in what those applications look like. I can't show you the last group. They're still waiting to be awarded, but we have succeeded in getting those through the process. But let me just give you an idea of what those R24 cohorts look like. Remember, they had to be environmentally characterized cohorts. Priority were on those that had NAEHS investment, and the review panel really spent a lot of time talking about the value of the cohort to the broad scientific community. So as usual, our top 3 incomes, special outcomes within epidemiology, there was a strong neurocognitive outcomes, metabolic, as well as a lot of birth cohorts. The exposures of interest in the primary top 3 are air pollutants, metals, and surprisingly nutrition and diet, but they go hand in hand. The cohort types and sample size varied. As you will see, the majority were birth cohorts and childhood cohorts. Some of the samples were as small as participants as 300. Some of them that weren't the birth cohorts were as large as 35,000. We had cohort locations all over, but majority of them were in North America. And give you an idea that some of them were rural and some of them are in urban. I'm sorry I had to highlight some of them out because they still haven't been awarded yet, and I apologize for that. This is, don't look at it, I'm just going to tell you about it. So this slide shows you a crosstab of exposure by the health outcomes that are studied in R24. So the larger the bubble, the more projects we have studying those that crosstab. So let me see, I think the next one will give you kind of a crosstab of some of the larger exposures and health outcomes we studied. You can see the larger circles in red, and those are about 7 of our projects are studying air and neurocognition outcomes and metals and neurocognition outcomes. And the next intersections are in pink. So these are our most common. So the metals and health outcomes are metabolic as well. And we see this change over time as the new cohorts come on board. This is I just kind of descriptively tell you what these cohorts look like. There is a few errors in here, so I do apologize for some of you grantees out there that are going to see this. So this is just an idea of how many were birth cohorts. So you can see several of them. We have the Childhood Leukemia Cancer Registry. Marble should be down here. That's our autism program with UC Davis. Element, Chamacos, ISA. These are cohorts that started prenatally and now are in their youth and adolescent and young adulthood follow-up. Atlanta actually should be down here. It's one of the cohorts. And just to let you know, some of these also are still members of ECHO. So although they may be here and out to youth, some of them are going back and starting new cohorts as well. And then up here, these are 2 of our community cohorts, Ferdinand and Michigan PBB study, and then the HEALS is the Bangladesh study looking at arsenic. So here are the cohort maintenance and related activities. Examples of the outreach activities that are going are partnering with community members, the use of social media to engage our participants and keep them informed of the science and the results. A lot of them are really interested in forming youth councils, so they came on board having a youth council. We allowed them to use some of the money to maintain that youth council with the teenagers. Also improved program, outreach program to inform the members in the community and stakeholders about some of the key findings. So some of them are doing their community advisory board meetings, maybe not on an annual basis, but at least they have some funding for that. Some of the biosamples and data integration that's going on is you can see all the different types of collection that's still ongoing, and the environmental samples are from the GIS. A lot of them have been doing more geospatial analysis, built environment, some data linkage with medical records. Some of them have actually even applied to get data linkage with school records as well. So a lot going on. And then here are the data management and sharing activities. So centralized, you'll see data sharing and availability, data management, analysis and visualization, integration and metadata. And here are kind of the top ones, that a few examples of what's going on. All of them are upgrading their biorepository and database. That seems to be one of the issues clear across most of the cohorts, is that somebody needs to pay for that. You know, whether it's, I didn't want this R24 to be a freezer RFA, it tends to be the freezers are outdated, they need updates. updated, the system needs updated. A lot of them are developing Dataverse websites to help share those analytical data sets. They're not creating the data sets to be shared, but an opportunity for you to request to share those. Developing online data access, establishing an environmental sample repository. A few of them are collecting air samples, dust samples, converting the data to standard ontologies. All of them are working on that. Expanding their web-based technologies. That gets back to the exposure enhancement that they're doing, measuring the high-resolution measurable measures of geographically linked exposures. A few of them are testing harmonization methods to allow analysis of complex mixtures, and all of them are developing data sharing portal to encourage the use of their data. I'm just going to give you a highlight of a few of them, one from each RFA that was released. So the first one is Katherine Metier. So Katherine comes from UC Berkeley as part of our Children's Centers program. Her program predates the Children's Centers. It was run by Pat Buffler. We've collaborated with NCI on funding this cohort. And so what she's really doing here is, instead of following up the cohort, she's really curating and managing the inventory of the biospecimens collected to date, the dust samples, and the data from medical records and the interviews. They are using nested in-house, enhancing the exposure characterization by looking at novel biomarkers of psychosocial stress during pregnancy. And some of the data activities that Katherine said she didn't have the opportunity to do while she was running R01s and P01s was the upgrade, here's another upgrade, the biorepository and database to facilitate the sharing, enhance the data sharing by improving the relational databases, as well as designing a website for data sharing. Next is a unique one that we picked out to share with you, and this is the Ferdinand Community Cohort run by Sue Pinney at the University of Cincinnati. So this cohort is not in follow-up currently, and they have really a lengthy publication record of where they have shared their data. What they really wanted to come in and take use of this resource was really to update the health status information, enroll 800 new generation cohort members. This is a cohort that was exposed to uranium based on their location in an occupational area. They're developing new biomedical informatic tools, and the data activities were, she didn't have standard ontologies. She started this way before ontologies were discussed. Registering the cohort data sets with the existing national repositories is a lot of where their effort is going. And then now they're developing the online portal to increase the efficiency in managing the resource sharing. With the Nurses' Health Study funded by us, this one is funded, NCI funds the Nurses' Health Study, the majority of this program, 1 and 2. This is Nurses' Health Study 3. So what was unique about this project that Francine applied for is that it wasn't traditionally an environmentally characterized cohort. So she came in a different way, where she said, I have this opportunity to take the third wave of the National Health Study and add environment. So it was interesting. Was it, the issue was, is that really what we were looking for? But it really gave us the hope that you could really broaden the scope of the Nurses' Health Study by adding these multiple exposures. This is a really good test case for all of us, because what she's doing is developing and maintaining the geographically linked exposure data. She is establishing a repository for environmental samples of this subset of the cohort. She's going to maintain the data management and quality control of this is about getting the environmental samples about 1,400, and then expanding the web-based mobile technologies and assessing spatial uncertainty and measurement error. So we're pretty excited for this. So if it has an effect on Nurses' Health Study 3, have the word environment with it. We are looking to entertain other opportunities for Francine to maybe get some biologics added to the Nurses' Health Study that could be set aside for exposure assessment. Stay tuned for that. Lastly, from Duke University, in our own backyard, a partnership between Katherine Hoya and Susan Murphy. Katherine has moved to NC State since then. They're going to follow up their Children's Center cohort, the NEST program, and expand follow-up through ages 11 and 17 and collect additional data and specimens. They're using, as well as data to estimate time-varying exposures and subclinical indicators of cardiometabolic dysfunction. That's not something she started with. It was more of a neuro focus, but with the at-risk population here in Durham County, these seem to be early cardiometabolic dysfunction in the PEDS group has been something that the community wanted to really assess. And data science activities include a comprehensible searchable web database, as well as archived data and hence searchability and preparing for linking. NEST is one of the data sets that is linkable to the health system here and the state-run medical records. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you some of the specific outreach activities that we have ongoing within the R24 program. This is Michelle Marcus at Emory has the data from the Michigan PBB cohort. This is a very unique, highly exposed community that's been followed for 45 years on PBB exposure in Michigan. The state of Michigan no longer was going to maintain that registry, so Emory took over that registry, and with some seed money that we provided through the core centers, through some R01s, through research to action, she now has this stability to maintain the registry, to have these. This is really maintaining the engagement through partnerships and community meetings. She goes out there 3 to 4 times a year. They have regular meetings with in coordination with the county health department, and they respond to inquiries from the community and clinicians and regularly update the website and their social media presence is large, and probably starting more ancillary studies based on the workers who were also exposed. This was really a community exposure assessment. So I give you an overview of the 2 RFAs, the notice of the changes, some of the activities. You can see they're broad, they're cohort specific, there's biospecimens, there's exposure characterization. But again, the priority here is at least they have to be focusing on the data science activities to get that data for reuse and to the broader community. So as you notice, we kept changing the FOA each year because more knowledge was gained. Chris Duncan came on board and helped me with some terminology. And we're trying to standardize what our expectations are as well as what our PI's expectations and what they can actually deliver. The challenge with some of these awards is dealing with perceived overlap with other R01 and R03 or other programs that they're being awarded with their current cohort. We did notice that there were more funds for senior key personnel than we expected. Again, we said in the beginning we thought it was to maintain those personnel, the trained for the evaluations, but the issue here is sometimes you have other funds to fund them off of something else, but this was something that was more sustainable. And then the data science efforts at each review were repeatedly described at review as weak. And a lot of that had to do is everybody wanted to know who was the data scientist. And we asked for who the data scientist was, but everybody had a different approach of who they thought a data scientist was. So they were more likely to be described as a database manager or a lead project biostatistician, and sometimes that sufficed, sometimes it didn't, and I learned a lot from Chris's talk and from everybody's talk that I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all here, and it depends on how far you are in the collection of the data. And then we also have noticed in the last 2 years there's really limited evidence of new data sharing activities, but it's only been 2 years. So the first award was made in 2016, they go in 2017, so we still need some time to see this come to fruition. Our path forward is to maybe revisit that last RFA. We did pause it in 2019 and really talk about what our expectations are up front and the structure and our deliverables. We thought about revisiting the eligibility. Should we require NAEHS investment of these cohorts? It's something to think about. I know we don't have a lot of cohorts out there. I think in 2014, large cohorts we estimated to be about 52. This data scientist required as a multiple PI, again, I learned more recently in the last couple of weeks that may kill it. So that might not be something that's feasible because who's a data scientist out there? And if there really is one, they're probably busy on everybody's meetings and boards and grants. We thought about limiting support for senior key personnel. And then I think something is the milestones need to be explicit, enforced, and realistic. So if we're really going to require some data sharing activities, We need to be really, we need to be helpful. We need to help them understand what our interests are, as well as what our expectations are, and then collaboratively, as a cohort of grantees, we really need to talk about what's realistic. And then really, I do know from many of the PIs that they're itching to develop opportunities to collaborate in that space and utilize the resources. So that's something to consider as well. So as I said, we still have, I blew it, Claudia. We still have the last RFA launched the website with program. We have project information to hopefully broaden our reach. We'll cross-reference that with our EPI catalog. And let you know, Bob Wright, we are creating a consortium listserv to communicate with the grantees and develop a webinar series. They've all been asking, except for Bob Wright, to meet with Bob Wright to talk about cheer and here and data ontologies and how we can learn from Mount Sinai. So tag your it, Bob Wright. And so we plan on doing that within the next month. And then, as you can see, there's a lot of efforts going on internally in NAEHS. So we are going to coordinate cross-division with our other concurrent data science and consortium efforts. Here's the website, not much to go into it. We're hoping to have links here. As you can see, there'll be publications, cross-reference, what's found online, and other resources. So it's a work in progress. And I didn't do this myself. I keep mentioning Chris Duncan. Cindy Lawler helped me originally with this program. Chris has come on board and really has taken a lead on helping me with that other part, and Amanda. Barbara Gittleman is our grants management officer who came to every single review with me, helped me work out some of the criteria that we have. Linda Bass was the SRO for and convened the SEP with help with Leroy and Alfonso and Kendra Morrison. And although Linda and I have been a pair on the children's centers, a collaborative team, I think this one was harder. Not just the conflicts, but just the language. Like, what were the expectations from the geneticists of sharing genetic data, from the data scientists? So they all didn't agree, but collectively, some of the reviewers came back, and she really formed a nice, cohesive group that had some more senior, repeated reviewers that were really educating each other, and they educated us. We debriefed every single time, so that was incredibly helpful. And Bonnie Jobert and Claudia always are helping me with all these programs we develop for resources with our epidemiologists. And I want to give a special shout out to all the members, some of you who are in here, special emphasis panel. And I do have another bullet here. I mean, we couldn't have done this without the PIs who apply, but really the research participants who allow our PIs to take the time to reach out to them, to engage in research. And without their engagement in our research, none of this would be possible. So thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Kim. Questions from the council?
Thank you. That was great. I'm just wondering about the data science goals. Obviously, the costs that go with that, but have you considered some model that has perhaps a data center for all these cohorts and trying to encourage use of GEOR here so that data can be harmonized across different cohorts, but also epigenomics, encouraging cohorts that have that to share that with the data center, and then the data center could become the data science hub, which might reduce the costs if it's centralized?
Yeah, I think that'll work for especially the birth cohorts coming straight out. It's a good point. We have talked about it internally of would we have a data center? Are there infrastructure in place where we could just tag on to something that already exists? But that has been discussed, but embedded within this RFA, probably not, maybe, but I think that's a really great idea because, as you said, even if we promote it, you have your ontologies, how are we going to sustain it? This is over in 5 years, you reapply for another 5, then we're going to have a sustainability of the data sharing and the access to the data. So I think it's a good idea. Core centers.
Sue, and then Jose.
Question.
Yeah, it's on.
I had the exact same question / comment as Bob, so.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
So, very nice presentation. As the non-EPI person here, when you talk to the investigators putting these proposals together, when you look at these cohorts across the lifespan, how much of an influence is migration or movement of folks away from the site where the cohort is actually selected? Because once, if people migrate, people move, the exposome will actually change. So have we heard from investigators, how they account for, I guess I'm trying to articulate this in a way that sounds like a epi question here.
So we do have a few of the funded grants that do deal with that issue. But in the sense of recruitment activities and attrition and re-engaging. So that's where, let's just take, for example, Brenda Eskenazi's Chamacos. That was a high-risk group for migration out of the community. And she's done some interesting efforts with her community advisory board to address those issues. Have they looked at it about what they get exposed to when they leave and come back? No, but they have been descriptively talking about where they went, some of them into Texas, et cetera, and then come back, but not that many that are dealing with that explicitly, not through this program. I don't know, Bob, you may want to talk about it in Mexico, but.
Actually, I like that idea. In fact, I was thinking that we have people that move, and it's hard to track them when they move, and this might be a mechanism to actually bring people back or
right.
evaluated even though they've moved. So
yeah.
I think that would be a really valuable thing for this.
Of course, the urban community is less, some of our populations have lessons learned even outside the R24 of how they maintain them and have these amazing participation rates that I can't even believe, but there's some really cool stuff that they do. So that's why a lot of them have got these youth advisory boards coming on board, because that has seemed to be the thing that it's not keeping the mom and dad anymore engaged in research, it's about keeping the young adult engaged. And they happen to be the most difficult to maintain, as Bob, you're probably figuring out, because they're their schedules and they're in school, they have after-school activities, and then once they hit teenager, they don't want to come. But there are ways that the Youth Advisory Board has been specifically designed, and a lot of them have asked for monies to keep that up and going or implement it.
Kim, to what extent does the distribution of awards that are made into this program, which looks like predominantly child,
yeah.
To what extent does that reflect the overall NAEHS commitment across the lifespan? And specifically, do the cohorts are the cohorts that are in older populations, are those able to compete with these other applications?
As you know, not fairly well. So that was, I forgot to put that bullet up there, but that was a consideration of maybe we have a lot of birth cohorts, we have a lot of children's cohorts, having a specialized for some of the older adults. Now, the Nurses' Health Study, although older adult, it's a unique population. They have over 4,500 nested within the Nurses' Health Study that they're going to follow up, and they have something already in place. But for neurodegeneration, for some of our Parkinson's cohorts, this is very difficult for them to compete with those birth cohorts. I agree with you. So that is something to consider, especially as we start getting more cohorts looking at Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other neurological or non-neurological diseases in adults, COPD.
One follow-up comment. I mean, based upon what you're doing with the Nurses' Health Study, which sounds like outside the box thinking, another possibility to consider might be to do some consider an opportunity to do some sort of primary environmental data collection in the setting of some of these multi-center incident patient clinical trials in neurodegeneration, because these are so if you take the incident studies in PD or AD, they're largely disease-modifying therapies, right? All of them have failed. So none of those drugs have actually worked, but those are cohorts that have been created across the country that could then be kept in place. And the cohort was actually developed by a clinical trial, sometimes NIH, but we lose those patients from the standpoint of trying to look at other factors that may be related to the disease. So maybe you want to think outside the box in that context as well.
Yeah. Good idea. Lynn?
I'm trying to, in my mind, which mic? At the beginning, you were talking about why it's in the interest of the NIEHS to continue these cohorts, the investment that you've had.
Right.
And what I can see from what you presented, the seems as if though that is what primarily the cohorts themselves are interested in. Support the senior investigators, support the outreach, the continued collection of data, continued maintenance of the cohort. But at the same time that the NIEHS also wants to change some aspects about how these cohorts are doing biorepositories, information access, making the information more available,
Right.
which is something completely different.
Right.
And I just know, from my own experience that managing a cohort through having a number of RO1s, you end up with a whole that's less than the sum of its parts, because the individual RO1 will not provide resources for community outreach, for some of that broader management, for some of the broader work that is needed to be done to actually maintain a cohort, because those grants are going to be hypothesis focused and are not going to necessarily fill in the cracks that need to be filled in to maintain an entire cohort operation. So, I'm very much agreeing with what some of the colleagues on the other side of the table said about that, maybe the NIEHS itself should figure out a way to take over some of the issues around data management and data science. I would guess some of these PIs, even if they have data scientists on their campus, which I think they do, to be honest, they just aren't going to want that person to be a co-investigator on a grant with them that to them is about maintaining their cohort. I am hypothesizing that could be the case, because that would be yet another thing that would subtract from their ability to manage and maintain and continue their cohort. And so I'm just thinking that might be a constructive way to do this. Also from the standpoint of then you have a greater probability that the information is going to be collected consistently, and that there will be the ability for others who want to use the data. Say if I were a data user, I wouldn't be having to learn 5 different
Right.
data manuals from 5 different cohorts. They would be united under one tent
Right.
that you had created. So it's just seeming to me, one, that the main reason for doing this is really important. You don't want to lose that investment. But second, that your second purpose is important, but the individual cohorts may not be the best people to do that, even though they probably do have that capability on their campuses. Because they do.
Gary, do you want to say anything? Help me, Gary.
So I was going to ask a completely different
Oh,
question.
I thought you were going to say something in response to Lynn Goldman. Just to let you know, we followed NCI's version on their cohort enrichment program using this mechanism or a similar mechanism. But of course, it's larger, it's more prescribed, 10,000 cases and controls. So I thought you were going to pitch in on that.
So yeah, NCI does have a cohort infrastructure and maintenance program, and as Kim said, it is prescribed 10,000 individuals as part of the cohort. One of the things that we were interested in, and as you guys are interested in as well, is the maintenance of the cohort to reduce the cost of research moving forward. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, one way that we evaluate the productivity of the cohort maintenance program is how well they leverage the cohort to do research using the RO1 mechanism or other mechanisms. And I know that it's early, but have you been able to see any productivity
We tried to look at it. I think that was in September, but it's too new, and because it was timed at the time of NCS going offline and ECHO starting, so we have a little growing pain there.
Some did not apply because they were going in a different direction. And then those who applied, I'm giving an example of Bob Wright, got an R01 right when he got the R24. So we haven't fixed that yet. So I can't tell you, are we saving money? Maybe you could ask Bob Wright if he's saving some money. But I know what he is saving is in the stability, especially of his trained personnel, and keeping that intact. And I bet Bob is doing a great job at maintaining the cohort and keeping them intact. The data science piece, I have seen more activity, but I haven't seen the savings yet on the R01s because we just don't have that many new R01s coming online since the start of this RFA.
Okay, thank you, Kim. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on. Remember, we have some time later that we can raise these questions again if you'd like. So our next presenter is Dr. Michelle Heacock from our Hazardous Substances Research Branch, specifically from the Superfund group. Michelle will give us an overview of some of the data science activities that have gone on in the Superfund research program, and updates on her recent data science supplement program.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. So I get the pleasure of standing up here on behalf of the rest of my colleagues. Bill Sook, who is the branch chief of the Hazardous Substance Research Branch, which houses the Superfund research program, tongue twister. Danielle Carlin, Heather Henry, and Brittany Trottier. So I stand up here to talk about all the hard work that they have done, and these people have done as well. So I just wanted to start straight off just making sure that those acknowledgements are front and center. We worked a lot with the activities that I'll talk to you about today with our Office of Data Science, which you heard Charles Schmidt and Stephanie Holgram. We're two key people that we really correspond on a regular basis with, and really we're involved with in a lot of the activities. MDB, who is our contractor for Superfund, and they were really instrumental in a lot of the data set listings, and they used to provide wonderful support for things like the webinars that we have for the data supplements that I'll talk about towards the end of the talk. Program analysis branch, I heard a lot about just making sure we're tracking the successes, and so we've really got them on board to think about how can we set up the data supplement program that I'll finish up with so that we're positioned to be able to start to get at some of those, what we think are going to be some successes. Of course, her staff too have just been really instrumental in helping us with that. Grants Management Branch, Lisa Archer-Edwards was heroic with the data supplements, so she deserves a special shout out. She had an immense workload and she just got through it. And then the data science work group, you've heard from a few of us already. I'll call out two people in specific. So David Balshaw, he was our fearless leader while Bill was doing a really prestigious internship across in Thailand. And so he was really instrumental in helping us get these data supplements, get them to fruition and get the concept out so that we could award them. Also, Chris Duncan, who you'll hear from next, he has been very instrumental in helping us with a lot of the activities that we'll go through. And that's not to say that the other folks in the data science work group weren't helpful, because they absolutely were. We've got a really good group of people with representation across the branches in our division. And then with the data supplements, I thought about this, I think it's the whole division that was involved in this. This is a really big undertaking. So just a really, public shout out to all their hard work for that. All right, so you've seen a variation of this slide, and this is just the NIH data science goals and objectives. And what we, on behalf of Superfund, hope to convince you is we are really kind of touching on most of these things. We are maybe optimizing data storage and security, but we really think we're working hard to modernize the data ecosystem, especially when it comes to thinking about data integration, and also getting data science expertise on board into our programs. So you might have seen these mandates a time or two, and I bring these up again just to make the point that Superfund supports research to fulfill our mandates, and our mandates also involve the typical kinds of research you think about when you think about NIH-supported research. So that's the biomedical research. But what we also have is we have that environmental science and engineering piece, which makes our research even more diverse than the research that you heard today. So we have projects that we support that are looking at ways to reduce exposure through things like using bacteria or plants, or collectively called remediation techniques. So we've got, like the rest of everybody in this room, it's all of the science is diverse. It's coming together with the goal to improve public health. So just making the point up here in that red, or that top right, is that we have diverse science. We also, through our grant mechanisms, we have P42s. Those are sort of the bread and butter, the mainstay of our program, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those in a couple slides. We have R25s, which are focused on training small business, like you'd expect, and individual research grants as well. So a little bit about those P42s. I won't go into this too much, and I'm sorry if this looks like such a distraction, but the point that I'm trying to make here is just to point out that we have a minimum of 4 research projects that are required in a P42, and that's 2 biomedical-based and 2 environmental science-based, and they're all meant to, a P42 center is meant to bring that research together to have common research objectives. So for instance, that research objective might be around a contaminant where they're looking to understand how it's having a health effect and maybe ways to try to reduce exposure in the environment. Along with that, with those research projects, are cores that are put in place to support the center so that we can really support problem-based, solution-oriented science. So the point of this is to convey that, but then to also show you not only are we scientifically diverse, we also have some diversity in we have some complexity in our infrastructure as well. And we think that this complexity within the infrastructure of a P42 center, and we have about 18 to 20 right now, I think. We have, it's a good closed group of people, and we feel like we're just really well positioned to not only integrate across the research that a given P42 center is trying to accomplish, but also integrate at a deeper level, and that's at the data, and that's what we'll focus on today. So I'm just going to focus just on a few things, and this is a schematic you're going to see throughout the talk, and this is just to serve to orient you. I won't go through detail with all of these things, and I know it's the end of the day, and you're probably, oh gosh, but I will focus just on these last 3 things in this red rectangle. Point out one thing, I'll just stand corrected here. What I failed to mention is in 2015, not only did we start webinars, but we had a strategic plan where we were very deliberate, including data science and data sharing in our Superfund research program's strategic plan. So that's important to point out. And another thing to point out that I didn't have, and I'll just point this out as well. So Rick Wojcik has been pretty supportive of the data science and data sharing activities, as has Gwen. So I hesitated, not sure if you're supposed to put leadership in there, but I wanted to make sure that we called both of them out as well. First, we'll go to posting the data steps. This was a small step that we did. This was just something that we were trying to address. You saw the fair already, so we're really looking at making our data findable. So this is a small set, and as we go through, what we hope you'll see is that our efforts are getting bigger and bigger. So this resources on our website, and this is just to show you what the landing page looks like. This is just to show you what we try to do is we try to make this resource page a dynamic page where we're actively trying to update it. So I encourage all of you, if you do have the time to visit it, if there's something we're missing or we've gotten wrong, would just please let us know. We're trying to have this as a tool for our grantees and hopefully other people who are interested in data science and data sharing. But what I will call your attention to is this data set listing. What we wanted to do was start to put the data sets that were publicly available on our website as a way to make them more findable so they're not just sitting in Geo without a context. And so here's the context. The context, so you have a data, we list all the data sets in the context from which the research it was generated from. So we have a description of the research project and then any data sets that go along with that. And we feel like this is a way to make the data a little bit more findable, but also start to give it some more context. And so right now we have over about 3,400 publicly available data sets that we just point to. We don't have a repository, we're just pointing to them. And as was pointed out earlier, the bulk of them are genomic, kinds of data. The next thing we'll delve into is the requirement that we had for a data management and analysis core, or a DMAC, and that came with our last RFA. So it showed you sort of this complex P42 center. Just we feel like it's poised, it's interacting, common research goals, and now we really want to start to integrate it at the level of data integration, or at the level of data. And so this is where our data management and analysis core comes in. And this is just a couple bullets to say what were we trying to accomplish with a data management and analysis core. And really it's meant to support and increase data science capacity within a given center, a focus on trying to bring that data science expertise where they're working hand in hand with a domain research expert so that they can together, before the data are collected, think about how we're going to manage the data for a particular project or core, but then also how are they going to think about that for a comprehensive data management plan for across the center. So again, we're just trying to poise them to be able to start to think about how they can share data across the center. So point out that we wanted them to have data science expertise, a data management plan, increasing data capacity, looking for ways to think about how they can make the data interoperable, and also making sure that to the extent possible that it's being deposited into and shared publicly, being deposited into a repository. So, you know, the goal is here is we want to accelerate the impact of a center's research. So the big focus was on the data, on the DMACs that are just coming out. They're brand new, so with the new awards, they're coming out with them right now. We were focusing on data management, but really the whole goal is that we want to start to have the capacity to integrate the data across the center. So we also developed these data supplements to support data integration and reuse. And so this is where I'll spend the bulk of the time. So going into it, what did we have? So we knew we had the data management and analysis cores, you know, coming down. That was going to be with just half of the centers because we had changed our review cycle, and so not everybody was being reviewed together. So half of them are going to have a DMAC, and then the other half aren't. So how do we think about supporting data science capacity, supporting data management with the goal of being able to share data to make it interoperable? So we knew that we had centers that were integrated already just by nature of having the cores that were natural integrators. We knew that the research across a center was just naturally transdisciplinary. These folks are used to collaborating on a regular basis. We knew that we already sort of had that structure in place for integration. We also knew that their data science expertise, not everybody has it. We appreciated that. We also knew things like, you know, ontologies and standard vocabularies. That is going to be something that is going to be a big thing because the science within a given center is diverse. And you step back and you look across the program and you're going to see even more diversity. We also knew that there wasn't going to be a home for the data that wanted to be shared, even if someone wanted to share it. And we also knew things that we were talking about earlier is there's costs involved with this. So this is where our data sharing, integration, reuse supplements came. And so these guides are brand new. We've only had them out for 3 months. So what we hope to do today is just kind of give you a flavor for what we've got, tell you how we're following them, and then hopefully we'll get to let you know how it all went. So the goals of the data integration and reuse supplements is really, we're wanting to enhance data integration. We want to integrate those centers at a deeper level, so we're not just looking at the research goals, we're trying to get them to share their data and integrate their data. We also recognize that to do that, you need to have the data science expertise And we knew that that data science expertise needed to kind of be a catalyst through the center to make sure that they were helping other members of the center be trained on data science. And we also knew that the way we designed it, and I'll go through that in the next slides, is this could be something that can help superfund program officers for certain, and then hopefully even stepping back, we hope that we even help the rest of the NAEHS program officers think about how we can start looking at fostering data integration and reuse. So you've seen a version of this before, and I should have stole yours, Charles, because yours is much prettier than this. But this is just the FAIR principles, and I'm not going to go through them all, but just to show it to make this point, we're focusing on interoperability and reuse. Another reality, I showed you sort of what we had going for us, what we knew that what were gonna present themselves as challenges. But another reality is not everybody is going to be at the same point for data sharing. In some cases, a discipline or a group just might not be ready to share, and they might have to really be starting at the beginning. And indeed, we did see instances of that, and I'll just highlight a few examples in a couple slides. So the data sharing, integration, and reuse supplements had two components. One was required an internal use case. And so that internal use case, the point of that was to build the data science capacity within the center. We wanted them to recruit data science experts because we wanted them to work with the research domain experts within the center. That was required. An external use case was highly encouraged. And this was one that we were most excited about, not to say that it's not important to build a data science capacity, but these external use cases were designed so that they're addressing a real world question. So you've got benefit. You're not just bringing together data for the sake of bringing together data. You're trying to bring data together because you're trying to answer a research question. And this required a collaboration with another SRP-funded researcher. And so I'll briefly go through the internal use cases and spend just a little bit more time on the external use cases. So again, the internal use case required, we wanted them to recruit data science expertise. We wanted them to use this to improve their data management with the goal of promoting data interoperability, so sharing at the level of interoperability. And then as applicable, we also gave them the option with these internal use cases where they could actually have intra or within center use cases where they could take a couple data streams from within their center, or even take a data stream from within their center with another publicly available data stream to try to see what they were doing, was it actually providing a benefit, and what do they need to do. And I think, Charles, you said it very nicely when you talked about the cost benefits. How much effort do you have to take to try to make that data perfect to integrate it versus getting the research value out of that? So we hope that these kinds of things will help address that. So for this last bullet where we said, hey, you can have a within center use case where you're trying to bring two data streams together, we actually had, so of the 19 P42 centers that responded to the supplement submitted applications, 16 of them had these within center within center use cases. So this is just, again, these are only 3 months old. We're still at the beginning of this, but this is just, the point of this is just to give you a flavor for the kinds of things that came in these within center use cases. So it's, 25 had specific contaminants, 20 were using human biomedical data, there was 9 different organisms, so the normal things you think about like zebrafish, killifish from the environmental science and engineering, 14 were using environmental data, and 8 were describing 8 were describing health endpoints. And 5 out of these were actually looking to bring together data streams that were from the biomedical and the environmental science and engineering projects. So we were really excited to see that. That was something that we also encouraged. So these, this is just to give you an idea of some of, we had asked them to, when they were bringing together, they were having these within center internal use cases, we wanted them to do that in a way that was moving the research forward, so based on a research question. And so these are just, we just took 4 of them just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that each of the centers were looking at and having these intra or within center use cases. So for instance, one was, is there a conservation of pathways among species that are regulated by contaminant exposure? So the external use cases, so I'll spend just a few extra minutes on these guys. And so this is, again, we wanted the applicants who responded this to be addressing a real world research question. We wanted them to, and it had to be within the scope of their grant. We wanted them to address integration of 2 or more data streams. And we encouraged, like we did with the within center use cases, biomedical data with environmental science and engineering data. Addressing barriers to interoperability and reuse. And it was okay if they weren't out there ready to share, but they were showing that we need to do these things way at the back end to even have that potential. And then the idea with these external use cases is really to their use cases because we wanted them to help inform the larger program and even stepping out to hopefully the rest of NAEHS can use these use cases as a guide for what is working and what's not when you're trying to integrate data. Where are the needs? And so these are just an idea of some of the types of collaborations we would have expected. So an external use case, they had to collaborate with some other SRP-funded researcher. So they could have integrate or worked with another P42 center. They could have worked with one of our R01 investigators, P42 center and R01 and outside data, and so on. And so the use cases, again, are what we wanted to have out of those. Importantly, is we're hoping to move the research forward, but also use them as a way to understand how can we use these to determine what the best practices might be and help us identify what the needs might be for integration and reuse. So like you saw with the internal use case, this just again, just giving you a high level view of the kinds of things that we came out, just to, so you can see what came out of the 19 that we funded. So 14 had specific contaminants that they mentioned. 8 were using human biomedical data, so we had a couple cohorts in there as well. 9 were using environmental data, and 5 were describing health endpoints. And so like you saw with the IUCs, this is just again to give you an idea of the kinds of research questions that were asked with the EUCs. And you can, so for instance, this top one is an example of there is a great potential for this. We're not ready to integrate, but we need to do this before we can integrate. And that is looking at mass spectrometry data. The problem is that the 2 groups were using different platforms, so the standards were different. So can they step back and try to use dictionaries and ontologies that can be used so that they could start to integrate a little bit more meaningfully? So these are just to give you an idea of the kinds of collaborations that we saw, which is great. This is something that we wanted to see. So P42, with P42, we had 11 that came in. We had 1 that came in that had 4 collaborators across. So that's 4 unique, so 3 P42 centers and 1 R01 investigator were getting together to bring together 4 different data streams to see how they can integrate that. So we're really happy to see that. The other thing I mentioned earlier is they could also integrate publicly available data as long as it was relevant to the research within their center. And this is the first example, it's just popping up to show you. In this case, what they're doing is they are working with an EPA collaborator, and they're using one of the toxicology platforms. So this is really nice because what we want to do is try to make sure that we're coordinating as much as possible so not everyone's siloed in doing what they're doing so that we can hopefully get everyone on board. And this bottom one, this one is looking at, this is more integrating kind of on a GIS level, and this is where they were using local and state data sets. So in this particular case, it was 3 different P42 centers who were looking across the country. So we have California, Texas, and Rhode Island, that they are bringing together state and local data along with data from the center. So we're stepping back, just reminding you that we understood that there were going to be cases, not everybody was ready to integrate the data, but that didn't mean just because you weren't ready to integrate your data, we felt like a use case for researchers who were poising themselves to integrate the data were just as valuable. What kinds of things do you need to do at the front end to poise yourself to be able to integrate? So this is just to show you an arrow. We're moving. As we move up and to the right, we have more readiness for data interoperability. So in this case, on the left, this is just what I told you about. This was the mass spec standards. That was an external use case. And on the top right was just one that we're really excited about, because here we have both groups are using killifish populations. In one case, we've got PCB exposure. In another case, we have PAH exposure. And what they're trying to do is integrate on a pathway level, which is something we feel like that's at a little bit more of a readiness level. So we're looking forward to seeing how that comes through. This is just, again, just giving you a flavor of some of the things that came through. These are things that were proposed by the applicants when they put in their applications. And these are what we asked them, what are your short-term outcomes? What are the long-term outcomes? And this is really a way that we're working closely with PAB so we can start to look, what does success look like? So for instance, this gives you an idea of, 14 of them proposed that they were going to try to harmonize ontologies. 13 were looking to publish their best practices that came out from their particular IC. And then some of them, 8 were looking at data visualization. So these are just, we're throwing this up again, just to give you an idea of the things that came through. We hope that this number will go up because this isn't a static thing. We are following these supplements as they go through, and I'll show you that in a few slides. So additionally, some of the other things that we expect to see are some of the things I think even Charles, you touched on a little bit when you were presenting, but just looking at the ability for multi-omics data integration, and even Kim, I think you in your cohort maintenance, you were looking at being able to multi-level integration of omics data. Also looking to see if data can be integrated on individual and population genomic levels to understand if there's susceptibility to chemicals and if there's also resistance. And then another thing that we had that came through in a few of these EUCs was looking at image data, which is something that's really needed as well. So we were happy to see that come through. So just a couple, kind of stepping back, a couple of key points that we wanted to show this in case we didn't make it. And this is just to say, with these external use cases for the data supplements, we were really trying to share, it was sharing and interoperability based on a research question. So what do you have to do to the data in order to be able to make it interoperable to answer a research question? So what's the cost benefit? Trying to keep those costs down, what's the minimal effort that's needed? We saw that there's a spectrum of data readiness, and we frankly see that as a strength because investigators are going to be at different points in the level of data readiness, and having recommendation at all those points is a benefit. Having the data science expertise, bringing them on and having that collaboration between them as well as the domain expert, because a data scientist on their own isn't going to be as effective as having that domain science expertise along with it. The other thing to point out is we wanted to impress upon you that it wasn't a situation where we made the awards and then we see what happens when the progress reports come in. We thought that this is something that is definitely going to be situations where if a group is struggling or if a group is doing really well, it'd be really great if they could share, hey, I'm struggling with this, or hey, this is working really well for me. And so can we sort of nip things in the bud as we go along? So opportunities for that come in the form of, we have routine webinars. We have 4 set up right now. We've had 2 already. We will have a best practices workshop that I'll talk about in the next slide. We have, Bob, we have a listserv. And we have website resources that I shared with you earlier. And so just to point out again, we really hope that this is an opportunity to, the webinar especially, to share best practices. And we hope that these lessons learned will be used more broadly. So getting back to this, not just awarding it and then hoping for the best and seeing what happens in the progress reports. This just gives you a little different from the timeline you've been looking at. This is just showing you how we're working with the supplement group all the way through till the big best practices and needs workshop. So we've had a couple of webinars already. The most recent webinar was ontologies, and in fact, in speaking in the spirit of making sure we're trying to leverage and collaborate as much as possible, we had one of the HERE researchers working really closely with one of the Superfund researchers to develop that webinar. So we hope that that keeps the lines of communication open so people are not reinventing the wheel to the extent possible. We also, what I'll point out, I won't go through the rest of this because I know you're all probably getting about ready to fall down because it's so late in the afternoon. But just to say that one thing that we are really excited about and we feel this is a key milestone is as people were applying for these and responding to this application, the expectation was with these external use cases, we want you to move the science forward, but we also want you to share sort of what your recommendations are for best practices. And even still, as much as you'd like to think, hey, we've got this, a good handle on this, we still need to know where are the things that still are presenting themselves as challenges and how can we best help foster that. So this is something that we're planning for early 2021. This will be an in-person, roll-up-your-sleeves workshop where we go through all of the EUCs and start to see where those recommendations come through. And I think I'm pressing the button. Okay, so Nathan, oh, there we go, thank you. Got it. So just what Pat had asked to do is just to give you guys an idea of some of the challenges that we were facing. So I'm looking at the time and I'm over, so I ought to speed this up. I'll just tell you that, of course, there's challenges because you have things that are on different platforms. You can't integrate if they're on different platforms. In some cases, you have a same model organism, but you have a different genetic background. In other cases, you have different model organisms, great opportunity to really get an idea of whether or not pathways are conserved, but you still have the problem of having that standards and making sure the terminology is in a state such that you can actually integrate it with confidence. And of course, I've just touched on this a couple times, just really we're trying to understand what the minimal information is to integrate. We don't want it to be where people are exerting all this work, but really all you need are just maybe 10 key things versus 100. Thank you. Sorry, Pat. And when we practiced, I did much better on time.
Hello, there we go. Thank you. I'm going to hold questions now until the discussion, which will start after a while. I did want to mention that one of the reasons we asked Michelle to include this was somewhat in similarities with the other supplement that I talked about. This is another model for trying to enhance data science. This was more of a full court press kind of model, which I can attest to because I was involved with it. But also, Superfund is kind of a different sort of animal from the rest of the DERT portfolio, and they had some unique aspects that allowed them to try some things with data science, and so I kind of wanted to bring that out. We're a one division kind of thing, but these are things that maybe we can move forward in the other parts of the portfolio. So thanks, Michelle.
Great.
You've heard his name mentioned about 40 times now, so I'm going to ask Dr. Chris Duncan to come to the stage here. Chris is in the Genes, Environment, and Health branch, and he came to DRT 2 or 3 years ago from our intramural division, and he has brought some data science expertise that we were lacking, and we're depending on him now. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Pat. and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure today to present a concept on an NAEHS program to support training and workforce development in environmental health data science. And this was really a team effort, and I am presenting today on behalf of my teammates, which include Carol Schreffler, Jenny Collins, Danielle Carlin, and Mike Humble. So throughout the day today, you've heard different examples of how NAEHS is aligning with NIH's strategic goals in data science. NIH really wants to focus on how the next generation of researchers can take advantage of advances in data science to impact human health. And with that being said, workforce development is one of the major pillars of the NIH Strategic Plan for Data Science. And this concept today falls squarely within that goal. So within the realm of biomedical science, environmental health sciences data are diverse, they're complex, and they're challenging. For example, our work deals with a very wide range of exposures, ranging from pesticides, air pollution, adverse weather events, and chemical toxicants, and more. Our work deals with all levels of biological organization, from the molecular level to cellular, tissue level, organ level, and system level. We deal with model organisms, humans, all the way up to the human population level. And our work deals with all stages of the lifespan. You've heard examples today from Kim and others, from preconception all the way to later life. And this results in diverse approaches that are being utilized in our field, which result in many different data types that include high throughput genomics and metabolomics experiments and data, imaging, geospatial data, sensor data, human health outcomes, and many more. So NIEHS recognizes that we need to harness the power of data science and train our workforce to take advantage of these technologies. And both data science and workforce development are key aspects of our strategic plan. And these are highlighted through specific goals in the plan. So our Theme 1, Goal 7 is a goal on data science and big data. And Theme 3, Goal 1 is the EHS professional pipeline goal. But this data science workforce and training initiative, we really feel like it'll have cross-cutting impacts that are likely to extend across many, if not all, other themes and goals of our strategic plan. So NIH made some earlier efforts to address the gap between the existing and needed skills for biomedical data science through the Big Data to Knowledge program, which Pat introduced earlier. And particularly, there were several investments in training and workforce development as part of this program. The goal of these initiatives were to enhance training and the development and use of methods and tools necessary for biomedical big data science. And through the Big Data to Knowledge training initiatives, several awards were made in different areas. These include short courses and resource development awards, institutional training grants, scientist training and career development awards, Enabling Educational Experiences Awards, and a Big Data to Knowledge Training Coordination Center. So NIEHS, particularly Carol Schreffler, played a lead role in many of these training efforts through Big Data to Knowledge, but these were designed to be applicable across the spectrum of our NIH ICs, and they were not IC or domain specific. So there currently are several challenges remaining as we apply these ideas to our environmental health sciences domain. So to address this topic, our team hosted a workshop at NIEHS in 2018. The goal of this workshop was to develop an overall strategy to build a data science competent environmental health sciences workforce. In this meeting, we tackled 3 areas. The first area really focused on the science of data science and environmental health, and this was understanding the current state of data science in the EHS domain. So in this session, we explored 4 different science areas that are data intensive and environmental health that were nominated by our different program branches, and used a use case model to explore the competencies and the people involved, as well as the hurdles and challenges in these different science areas. The second part of our meeting was about relating big data to knowledge accomplishments to our EHS training goals. In this session, we invited several of the BD2K training awardees to talk about their experiences with BD2K, successes and their obstacles, and how we can apply what they had learned to EHS training goals. And finally, the third part of this meeting was really getting to the heart of what we wanted to do, as tackling how can we build EHS training in data science. And this session explored several NAEHS training resources, and we had a great discussion on how to build training in our domain. I encourage everyone to check out the workshop summary, which is linked at the bottom of the slide here. So I'd like to highlight a few of the major recommendations that came out of this meeting. So the first deals with a theme that pretty much everyone's talked about today, improving access to environmental health sciences data, and as a way to drive innovation and to drive new training opportunities. Secondly, there are existing data science training courses out there, but they're not particularly focused on environmental health sciences. So a major recommendation was to support the creation or adaptation of these short courses, online trainings, or even core curricula at the intersection of environmental health and data science. A third major recommendation dealt with a cross-cutting theme that cut across all sessions of this meeting, and that was cross-domain communication. And a major recommendation was that we need to foster partnerships between health researchers and quantitative scientists. Another major recommendation was that we need to support data science training across the various career stages and the various knowledge levels that we represent. And this matrix on the right kind of gives you an idea about how we're thinking about this. There are data science training needs spanning the career spectrum, all the way from the most junior trainees to the most senior of scientists. And also, we need to think about, there's a range of expertise on the scale from pure data scientists to our pure environmental health scientists. So we need to target this relatively broad spectrum of individuals and develop connections and training opportunities across this matrix. The final recommendation was that we need to outreach to a broader spectrum of stakeholders within and outside of the environmental health community. This included professional societies such as IEEE and other quantitative groups, but also internally to our trainees and training directors. So following up on this recommendation, our team put together an interactive poster that we traveled around to several different either grantee or society meetings, for example, SOT and the Superfund Research Program meetings. And we wanted to interact with trainees and get their feedback on, what are your most important data science skill sets and your most beneficial prior training experiences in this area? And further, what are your training needs? What do you need to advance your data science skills? Likewise, we also got feedback from the NAEHS training program directors at our recent meeting in December in North Carolina. And we held 2 breakout sessions at this meeting, and approached the training directors with questions on what are the challenges and limitations that you have to imparting data science skills to your trainees? What are the current approaches that you're utilizing, and what are some potential solutions that could help us reach these goals? So first, I'd like to highlight several of the challenges and needs that were brought up through this exercise. Several challenges and needs were kind of generally focused in the area of educational resources. Both trainees and training directors cited a need for increased access to data science-focused training resources. So this could be courses or workshops, and importantly also data sets, and also data science faculty. Trainees frequently ask for short courses on specific topics, and one that's really popular right now, of course, is machine learning, and particularly machine learning in the environmental health data context. And finally, fundamentals were brought up as a very important thing. Students or trainees need programming, fundamental programming skills, and also fundamental skills in statistics. Another group of highlighted challenges and needs fall under the area of transdisciplinary collaboration. And from communicating with all these different groups, it's apparent that there are existing barriers for communication across disciplines. Trainees repeatedly ask for exposure to diverse approaches across disciplines, and they wanted ways to find new data science partners, ways to collaborate, share information and skill sets. So in these two areas, I'd also like to highlight some approaches and solutions. First, for the educational resources. Many training directors mentioned that they supplemented their training for their trainees with online courses or also in-person experiences like boot camps or targeted workshops or short courses that are focused on data science. There was an importance placed on leveraging existing departments, existing data science programs, and not reinventing the wheel, and a need to facilitate the awareness of existing training opportunities. Approaches and solutions for transdisciplinary collaboration included partnering our environmental health scientists with data scientists, creating those partnerships. But also, we need to attract quantitative scientists to our domain. And one way to do this is with methods development around our rich, large EHS data sets. And one more thing, cross-training was an important theme that was brought up, and some training programs are using dual or multiple mentorship models to cover the different expertise areas. So based on the feedback that we've heard from the community, our team is proposing a broad, multi-phase concept to advance workforce development for environmental health data science. We have two program goals as part of this proposed concept. The first is to improve the data science skills of all environmental health scientists. And the second goal is to increase the number of environmental health data scientists. And this can have a couple of flavors. This could be quantitative trained researchers that can develop new tools and methods for our field. Or it could be researchers that are employing these advanced applications and data science tools for environmental health research. So based on all the feedback, our program team got together and put together a list of some guiding principles that we'd like to follow for this program. The first is leveraging existing resources and adapting existing training models. So it's important, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we want to take advantage of the momentum of existing research and training efforts. Going back to that workforce matrix, we've got a diverse array of needs, so we need to embrace diverse training approaches to support multiple pathways. Also, we recognize the interconnection between the research base and the training. So we want to recognize and foster that interconnection. Communication, again, is a big theme, and we want to facilitate cross-domain communication, collaboration, and team science. And again, the FAIR principles. We want to make our training and educational resources findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And finally, as Charles mentioned earlier, the data science field is a fast-moving field, and we want to maintain agility to adapt as technology advances. So as I said earlier, we are proposing a multi-phased program. We have a couple of activities that we're proposing to do initially, but then we're also considering several other activities to do as time goes on. In the initial phase, the two are an administrative supplement program for NAEHS research grants to support the training of data scientists in the environmental health sciences domain. And the second is an open educational resources program for environmental health data science. And I'll go through each of these in a bit more detail. First, the Administrative Supplement Program. This program is intended to support quantitative scientists who can develop novel tools, methods, or technology to apply to the data and the biomedical question that is being explored in the NIHS parent grant. We would model this program after the existing research supplements to promote diversity and health-related research program. And currently, we're considering candidate eligibility ranging from the graduate student level to the junior faculty level. And in here, the focus would be on the training and education of that candidate, who should be a data scientist, and then they can supplement their training and their expertise in the biomedical area of the parent grant. The mechanism we're considering is the administrative supplement. And for timing, we're considering awards to be awarded as early as fiscal year 21. I'd like to highlight a few key aspects about this program. First, through this, we're aiming to attract candidates who are in areas that are not traditionally supported by our NIHS training programs. We want to attract programs that maybe would be traditionally trained through NSF-type programs. And these could be in areas such as computer science and engineering, information science and technology, applied and computational mathematics, and computational physics or computational chemistry. An important required aspect of this would be a transdisciplinary mentoring team. And the focus of the research activities should be on bringing new tools and new methodologies to EHS research. So now I'm going to switch gears to the Open Educational Resources for Environmental Health Data Sciences program. So this program is designed to support innovative data science-focused research educational activities that deal with one or more of the following areas. It could be enhancing training of the broad environmental health science workforce in data science, engaging data scientists in environmental health sciences research, and/or fostering formation of transdisciplinary teams that will solve data-intensive environmental health problems. This could also support in-person or electronic short courses that are designed to impart various types of skills, such as technical skills, operational or professional skills. And this program would be modeled in part after the NIGMS, Innovative Programs to Enhance Research Training Program. The mechanism we're considering is the R25 mechanism, and we would anticipate that awards could be awarded as early as fiscal year 22. I'd like to highlight a few key aspects about this program. Going back to the big workforce matrix, these programs are not, they're not just focused on trainees, they could be focused on a wide variety of trainees. And we want innovative components, so it could include things such as online curriculum development, like boot camps or workshops, codathons or hackathons where teams are gathering around a common problem in software development. It could be competitive events or data challenge type events, or train the trainer models where you're developing a network of trainers. Or it could be team building activities where transdisciplinary teams are formed in a workshop type setting. An important aspect of this is to reach as broadly as we can across the community, and we would require broad dissemination of the educational materials and the outreach activities. So the later components of this program would, as I said earlier, adapt according to evolving needs of the field. And we have several, we're considering several options. And these include an environmental health data science training coordination center. This center could help facilitate the discovery and accessibility of training materials in data science and environmental health. And it could also help develop communities of practice and transdisciplinary interactions between data science and environmental health. We're also considering administrative supplements to NAEHS institutional training grants. And this could be to do a couple of different things. It could be to add a slot to train individuals at the intersection of data science and environmental health science, or possibly for non-didactic training, such as internship, externships, or other creative ways to train in data science. We're also very interested in targeted fellowships, career development, or career transition awards in environmental health data science to help move career pathways forward in this area. So we've thought about how to measure success in this program. So in collaboration with the program analysis branch, we've come up with several metrics that we'd like to see and we can measure as this program progresses. So this could include environmental health science-focused data science educational materials and outreach activities that are widely distributed across the world. And associated with that, we want to see unique and sustained usage and users of these educational resources. We see novel data science tools and methods coming out of this, as well as application of data science tools to solve environmental health questions. In the long term, we expect to see increased numbers of environmental health sciences grant applications and publications that are developing or applying data science methods to their research question. And also we would expect increased numbers of transdisciplinary collaborations on grant applications and publications. And ultimately, we want to see new discoveries that capitalize on the advances of data science to benefit the broad environmental health sciences portfolio. The council discussants today are Dr. Brad Racette and Dr. Robin Tangway. And I'd like to thank my colleagues on the program team, Danielle, Jenny, Mike, and Carol, as well as everyone else in the division, and thank you also for your attention. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the reviewers.
My name's listed first. Thanks, Chris. Really great presentation, and I think you actually addressed some of the comments that we had exchanged some emails about the original concept. I think you addressed it in your presentation, so that was great. So overall, I'm supportive and enthusiastic about this concept and strongly agree with the importance of NAEHS leading on big data research. I think the focus on education and awareness is critical, and I think this concept could improve the quantity and quality of big data portfolio at NAEHS. I think there may be some additional opportunities under the training and workforce development concept, and I actually, my main complaint, if it really hesitate to say complaint, is that I think this is it's too incremental. I think it's a very small step, and I'd love to see a much more aggressive effort in this area. So a couple specific comments about the concept. One of the primary goals identified under the concept was to improve the data science skill set for all environmental health researchers, and to increase the number of environmental health researchers using big data methods. So I don't think it's necessarily realistic to expect that all environmental health science researchers are going to improve their knowledge. I think it's it's like saying that you expect all environmental health researchers to become biostatisticians. I don't think that's really necessary. I think that collaboration and forging collaborations is really the critical part of that. So given that I think ultimately collaboration is really going to be the most important output from this concept, at least in later stages, I think that a model that I would love to see embraced, and so this is maybe getting a little ahead of over my skis a bit too much, is the concept of the Victor program, where you really sort of force collaborations in areas that aren't normally collaborating. And I think that program is a really great model for trying to bring together collaborations in big data into environmental health research. With respect to the proposed Tier 1 training opportunities, I'd like to see some clarification as to who would be eligible for the administrative supplement grants. And I think you touched on this a little bit in your slides. I think that we should be trying to identify trainees outside of our normal grantees, engineers, computer scientists, and early physician scientists. Now, Charles commented on this earlier, the computer scientists can be very difficult to recruit into the field. They're beyond their early careers. Their skills are very, very highly sought after in industry, and I know that academic institutions in particular have difficulty retaining those kinds of people in our institutions because they're just not paid the same. I'm most enthusiastic about the next tier research concepts, which you articulated at the end of your slides, and I believe those will have the greatest impact on growing the big data portfolio for NAEHS. With respect to the metrics, I think that the metric of increased transdisciplinary collaborations will require more aggressive funding in those anticipated future tiers, which I think we all understand. And finally, this is once again a comment for those later tiers, when considering future funding opportunities, I think it will be important to consider that much of the work that may occur in the big data science realm may be not necessarily hypothesis testing and can be difficult to get through standard CSR study sections. And so I think that may require internalization of some of that review process so that we can really grow this area in a way that will be meaningful to NIEHS.
Thanks. I largely agree with what Brad mentioned. And additionally, though, it is incremental. Certainly, I support NIEHS trying to align these efforts with the strategic plan and data science. But I think there are a lot of there's so much activity. We talked about it on the phone with your group. So much activity at institutions in the realm of data science, and it seems to me that it's the questions, not unlike what Michelle talked about in the Superfund Research Program. If you frame it around questions that require data integration, most of us in this room don't have the skill set to do that. So what we do, like good little soldiers, we find those collaborators that have that skill set. And then you start, everything is local. You start building these teams locally, and then you build that competency. And and as much as I applaud NIHS trying to be the driver of that matchmaking, I don't think this level of investment will really get you there. I think you know that. So I think we know our teams are going to change, and they have in the past. You're bringing in epidemiologists when you need them, bringing in bioinformaticists when that field emerged, and there was this push around the country to everybody needed to be a bioinformaticist. That's not the way it actually operationally has played out. And so I think we're a pretty resourceful group of folks. But then the bigger problem, I think that I think everyone is worried about, as Brad mentioned it, is someone who is strictly trained in data science to come into this realm of review criteria will get his head taken off by these study sections. And so how do we incentivize them to really want to commit some of their activities towards these types of questions? And I think that's the larger problem. And again, I like the way the DMAC cores as an example in the Superfund Research Program. The goals of the whole program are centered on that expertise. So you kind of bake it in the cake. And I think that's probably the way this is actually going to work. I like these workshop ideas, and that'll get an awareness. But what I hope when we talk about this on the phone as well, that it doesn't lead to thinking, and we're sensitive to this in our program, that all of our trainees need to be data scientists. And then you even mentioned in your slides, what's lacking is often data, right? So we need data collectors still. So we don't want to, hedge too far to the, all the answers are out there. We just need to integrate tables and, columns and rows. And I think there's a fear if we put too much emphasis on data science that we may lose that innovation that's needed to drive the next types of data. But overall, I'm very supportive of long-term effort, though.
Thank you. Any other discussion, questions from the, Jose?
Chris, very nice presentation. The question that I have, one of the, potential funding methods to R25, that's the research education program. Among the components that you described could be part of those proposals are online curriculum development, and you also talk about broad dissemination of educational materials. Would this be something open to for-profit organizations that are in the educational space?
That's an interesting question. Well, I don't know if I know the exact answer here, but probably not. But that's something that we can take back and discuss amongst our team.
Further questions? Did you want to raise that?
We're just talking here, what about an SBIR, if it's the right size of organization?
And there are groups that specialize in at least toxicology risk assessment, in having workshops and having training sessions that you pay and you get a certificate at the end. So I could see a potential scenario in which they see this as an opportunity to get additional funding and sources, to support their activities in educational outreach. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now I understand what you're asking. Yeah. So the answer would probably be no to that. So the requirement would be for broad dissemination of the activities. So we probably would not permit the charging of the fees. We want open educational resources.
Do we have another? Okay. Terry, real quick.
So under the concept of fellowships, would this also include internships, summer internships, for instance?
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea and something that we've explored within our group and thought about using the administrative supplements to the institutional training grants as a potential way to do that. And Carol has led a non-didactic breakout session at the recent training directors meeting, and they had some discussions on that. And so yes, we've definitely considered that.
Okay, with that, we need to have a vote from council to give your clearance for this concept.
So I need a motion to approve the concept. Got it? Got a second? Got a second? Any discussion? Yeah, and we need you to vote electronically as to whether you approve or not. And Liz, you'll let me know when they voted? Did you give me? Okay, great, thank you. So with that, I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath and strap in here. We're going to make you work for a while. We've set aside at least an hour for discussion of what you've heard today and how we're going to move our data science program forward. I'm going to ask that the speakers, all of you, go up to the table at the end down there. Chris, Michelle, Kim, wherever you are. David, if you don't mind coming up. Charles, if you're around somewhere, you can join us at the table, please. Dr. Cindy Lawler, the Chief of the Genes, Environment, and Health Branch, is going to be moderating our discussion today. We set aside an hour. We'll take longer if we need it. Let's see how the flow goes here.
We need some handheld mics.
Yes, thank you. We want to make sure we have some handheld mics around. Yep, Nathan's bringing them because we like to include the whole room in the discussion plus the people on WebEx. So with that, Cindy, are you ready to kick it off?
Yeah, just we're going to ask Ken Fassman to kick this off, but before I ask him to do that, I just want to follow up with Pat. I know it's the end of the day, but we really need you to hang in there with us. I've got my new Dr. Pepper, so got my caffeine ready. You've heard a lot today, but this is one of the most important parts of the meeting. This is where we get to hear from you, the breadth of the science that's represented here with all of you. We welcome your input and your questions, so just please stay with us here and help us out. So with that said, can you kick us off with just some overall comments about what you heard today?
All right, so I'm going to preface my comments to give everybody some context. These are going to be very personal comments based on my own experience. And much of that experience has been of almost 30 years involvement, first as a collaborator, then an advisor, and then finally as an employee of the Jackson Laboratory. And over those 30 years, I've seen a data science program develop there from its infancy. 30 years ago, there was a collection of databases at JAX that consisted of paper files, punch cards, word processing files, and the first major data science grant from the NIH to JAX was the development of the mouse genome database 27 years ago. And that led to a whole program in mouse genome informatics, and that has been the core of data science at JAX all that time. And I've been involved in that program one way or another throughout. JAX is now in the midst of a dramatic expansion of our data science activities. And so we've been wrestling with, over the last couple of years, the same problems that you've all been describing today. And I am struck by the congruence of our plans, of our ideas. Chris, in particular, I applaud you for the way that you laid out things broadly. For example, your approach to talent acquisition and, even more importantly, talent development, both internally within the Institute and with EHS community broadly. And the concept clearance is a perfect example of that. I'm also struck by the fact that I got the privilege to join this community at the 2011 or 2012 strategic planning workshop, and the arc of the development of data science ideas at NAEHS and the environmental health science community broadly. It's just been terrific to watch this grow. So, you know, anything that I can do personally to continue on that journey, I'd be thrilled to do so. I wanted to note that, unfortunately, it's been hard to mount and sustain a central effort from the NIH Director's Office of Data Science Strategy. And so if that comes up again as an element that can assist you, great. However, given the unique mission of NIEHS relative perhaps to other ICs, and as you've talked about repeatedly today, the diversity of data types and scientific disciplines that you work with, I think it's really, really important that you continue to do exactly what you've been describing today. Please don't wait for orders from the central command. Keep going. One or two other points that came up during the day, some notes that I sort of scribbled in as I went this afternoon. Long-term data stewardship is a critical issue for the global biomedical research community. You know, there have been some long-time, expensive efforts such as Elixir in Europe. Not a lot have come out of that. I think, so again, focus on your own. Focus the data sets that really matter to your constituency, but keep asking the question with the grantees, with your users, with the people that you're supporting. What is the life cycle of key pieces of data? Not everybody needs to be maintained for all times, but don't expect that the lifetime of a data set is measured in R01 renewals. Because that's the biggest problem we have. We fund the novel and we don't maintain the popular and still valuable. The model is, and also in that regard in particular, it's important that we need to take a portfolio approach. Most of the review process that we have is focused on asking the question about an individual grant application. Is this meritorious? Should it be funded? We don't have, for program staff and for the council, good mechanisms that say, how do we think of our programs as an ongoing portfolio? All we can do is make individual decisions about them one at a time. Do we renew or do we sunset a particular program? And then lastly, and maybe the least exciting part of all of this, but in my mind it's so very important, ontologies, standards, metadata. You know, I think if I asked my colleagues in Bar Harbor, arguably the most important products of the mouse genome informatics effort were our ontology and nomenclature efforts, most particularly the gene ontology. I remember the early days of microarray expression papers when you couldn't take any two papers and compare the results. Go is imperfect, but it changed that literature dramatically. We're building on that with our mammalian phenome ontology. We recruited Peter Robinson and built up the human phenome ontology. You know, it's important that you set aside a proportion of your funding activities to continue to promote ontology development in this space, because nobody else is going to do it. None of the other ICs are going to support those ontologies. I think I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ken. Those were really great and a lot of insights. Just one comment I'll make in response. I completely agree with you. Ontologies are just key to everything. Some of you may have noticed that many of the workshops that Pat described were about like ontology development. And there's a reason for that, because it's a really difficult, challenging problem. And one of the things I think Charles Schmidt is doing through the Office of Data Science is recognizing what we heard through those workshops is it's not like a one and done. You need to build and sustain this community and sustain this momentum to really develop and implement environmental health sciences like ontologies, fill the gaps and offer them up and do it in a very community-driven way, close to the data. So we hear you, and I completely agree with you. And then the second thing I'll make before we open it up, again, you brought up this key issue about stewardship of the data over time, and we heard many other comments around that. Just to paraphrase, well, when my grant ends, how do I have the funding to continue to provide access and vet people and, get those data in shape to share them? And I don't have answers to those questions, but I do want to reassure everybody that NIH has been hearing those questions and asking them ourselves, and Chris actually can share some information with you about some of the NIH-wide thinking about how to kind of address the long-term issues related to where the data live. So Chris, do you want to just briefly?
Yeah, so we were discussing this earlier. So the NIH, as high levels, thinking about data storage kind of in a tiered way. So first of all, the priority or the recommendation or default would be storage of data sets in open repositories. And the tiered approach that's currently being developed at the NIH level depends on the data set size. So for very small data sets, less than 2 gigabytes, NLM is exploring deposition of these data sets in PubMed Central. I think the majority of the data sets we're probably thinking about here are within this range of 2 to 20-ish gigabytes of data. So for this, NIH is encouraging deposition in either commercial or domain-specific repositories. And there's several ongoing efforts to modernize the ecosystem in this area. So there's currently a workshop going on right now, and Charles brought it up in his talk today on the role of generalist repositories in the biomedical domain. So NIH has done a pilot with Figshare, and there's currently a Figshare instance that's in pilot mode. Also, Pat mentioned 2 new RFAs that have been released, in which we participate in. So one is to support biomedical data repositories using a U24 mechanism. And this is a vast improvement over the past, because many of these have been supported using the R01 mechanism, which the review criteria, the impact criteria just don't align well with maintaining these types of resources. So NIH is thinking about this kind of in a strategic way. And then for very large data sets, very valuable data sets like sequence read archive, common fund data sets, NIH is going through the STRIDES initiative to explore storing these data sets in the cloud. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So now I just want to open it up. We want to hear your thoughts about, or questions about anything that you have heard today. This is your time. Lynn?
Well, I'm really excited by a lot of what I've heard today, and it seems to me that you've been incredibly creative in trying to identify all the ways that you can move forward, minus having a big new program called, you know, environmental health informatics, which would be better.
Yeah.
but you don't have that. I would be very supportive of an effort that brings more data science expertise into the NIEHS, either that is, you know, by actually bringing it in or by setting up some kind of a center of excellence that supports you to help you to develop a more standardized set of resources that can, if you may, provide guidance or even impose, you know, requirements on your grantees. Because one thing I did feel I heard is that, I mean, a good thing is there's been a lot of experimentation because you've had a number, you know, whether in Superfund or with your children's cohorts or in other settings, you've had people working on, well, okay, if I want to do this, how do I create it? So, but at the same time, I think there's a certain duplication of effort that is created through that, and then further effort that will be needed in order to make those data interoperable in the future. And that, you know, at some point in time you have to say, okay, we've done that, and it's time now to say, okay, what do you want to standardize on, you know, in the way some other parts of NIH have with their data. And even though I would probably also complain about that, you know, and the impacts of that on my investigators, but I do think at the end of the day, that is, most of us would rather see more effort, you know, going into actually doing the research. And that if there can be efficiencies by developing standards, that's probably the better way to go. So, and which happened, you know, with the gene sequencing data eventually, you know, the Jackson labs developed their own, but eventually the NIH said, thou shalt, you know, put the data in this way. And whether that was perfect or not, I can't tell you. There are others at the table who could tell you, but that's, you know, sometimes being perfect isn't as important as being good and allowing people to be able to focus on doing what they do best.
Thank you. Irasima?
So I'm really excited about this, but at the same time, I'm very concerned. Political science used to be qualitative, now it's more quantitative, and when we go to political science conferences, some of the panels focus on survey data and heteroscedasticity. I don't even know how to pronounce the word. It's when variables, you know, which variable has a higher explanatory power. And so we talk more about methods and about the power of the variable and the data than the actual political question. And so I think that's a concern. I think cost benefit is important because you need a lot of infrastructure to support all of this data. And then I'm worried about gender and minorities. Computer science is dominated by males. I think we have about 20% of women in computer science, and minorities, it's less than 5%. And so that to me is something to be wary about. And then to what end do we need all of this data? Because you go to conferences and at the end of the day, it's like, what do we need? More money to gather more data and not really solve the problems. And so while I know it's important, I really feel that we need to ask to what end do we need all of this data and how do we improve people's environmental health at the end of the day? And I think that's what we're all here about, and we need to really focus on that final question.
Katrina?
I'll send you an email because I have lots of thoughts about this. But
we got time.
Just as a start, I want to build on Irasima's comment, but sort of operationalize it in terms of you had a list of 7 things, FAIR plus 3, and suggest an 8th, which is equity. Because when you're talking about the need to balance cost and openness, you're really talking about the opportunity to shape a research agenda and your investments in doing that. And coming from, you also mentioned an ecosystem perspective. I came from the field of ecosystem management, and what we learned 20, 30 years ago with the reams of data that we had there was that in order to make sure that that data was oriented towards problem solving, right, to addressing the kinds of things that we want to do, it was important to have structures for interaction of multidisciplinary experts, building what we call an epistemic community. The second was community engagement and making sure that people who might not be able to directly access the data, that their interests and concerns would be facilitated in how things are made available. And to that end, there are many tools, decision support tools like value of information analysis and multi-attribute utility theory and participatory modeling that I know you're all familiar with, but I didn't hear discussed here, which I think have a lot of potential to link the kinds of technical structures you're talking about with this 8th theme of equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
This has been a very exciting day. I think that it's covered a lot of what really is a very important emerging field. And I've been around for a long time, and I've seen this in others, like it happened with genetics, and then going into genomics and biochemical genetics and so on. And I think that when you look at areas that emerge, and I think that data science is going to be here to stay and to become sort of a standard area of science. I think that we need to think of what were the elements that were essential to get from an area that is evolving into one that actually becomes well established. And I think that what has been proposed very much helps give it a start. But clearly it's not going to be enough to push it to be well established. And part of what one has to think about is how do we promote the development of programs, academic programs that actually develop data scientists. And frankly, some are going to be more on the environmental side, but they're going to be, there's the same effort going with infectious diseases and data science and modeling, etc. Is what actually is needed to just sort of push this field beyond just starting to actually getting established. And I think that goes to the point someone made about it's the study section and how do you prepare a scientist that actually could go on and really compete well. Because on one side, yes, this is about collaboration and having people that are maybe epidemiologists or toxicologists working with people in biostatistics, but this is going to continue to evolve to be a field on its own, and then how do we support that? I think that we just have to continue to think about the evolving nature of this, and what are the steps that will be needed to get it to the goal that actually we will establish field, and it will continue to evolve.
Thanks. Robin?
So in terms of the data storage, so I'm thinking this may be a little bit too in the weeds, but it really impacts all the terms of how you're going to do data sharing and storage. But you think about the many goals stated on why we want to have better data science. Part of it was driven by reproducibility and rigor, not just in answering questions, right? So that becomes, to me, really challenging, right? Because in order to help this kind of feed reproducibility, you need quote raw data, not time-stamped analyzed data, and which is more amenable. The latter is more amenable to storage. And I don't know that, I'm sure every field has a unique, you talked about imaging, that's a great analysis, and or any timed measures, you're always taking some averaging. And I mean, how is everyone thinking about how far back, even for valuable data, are we going to have the capacity? I think in the non-target analysis, and thinking you, David, is a good example. As instruments change, as the algorithms driving the analysis, the instruments change, if that raw data isn't saved, you really cannot reproduce it. But to save it all to the magnitude that we're all excited about being able to implementing our questions, there's a big trap there. And so how are we thinking about those types of kind of more weedy questions?
Brad?
Just to follow up on that, just with respect to imaging, which I do know quite a bit about. So if you store simply the final data point that you're using in your analysis from a complex method, imaging method, that's easy, right? So we could store that anywhere. But the post-processing methods that are often used to come up with data change all the time, and so that underlying data may be incredibly valuable 5 years down the line when people develop new techniques to how they process those same data. So without that thought about what we're really looking to create here, I think it really does, it could really undermine the goal of this process.
David?
Yeah, so it's a really important point, particularly in the omics fields and some of the things that we're doing in the metabolomics community. So the workbench is actually handling both. And so you've got the raw data with rich metadata to allow recreation of that as well as the process data. But you do run into some challenges later because a lot of that data can only be analyzed with proprietary software that requires very expensive licenses. One of the projects that we're looking at now is actually doing quantum mechanical modeling in the cloud, and we can export the variables, the output of that, very inexpensively. But the scratch files that get generated while you're doing those calculations are massive, multi-terabyte files that we can store in the cloud. Doesn't cost us anything. But if we want to reuse that data, we have to redo the calculation all over again. Otherwise, we have to incur a non-insignificant charge to pull that data back out again. So it does create a lot of reuse issues. And I think it's something that we as a community are going to have to struggle with going forward.
Terry?
I think one thing that we face as academics when we're going through training graduate students and postdocs is the risk that we face to losing them. So the whole idea of retaining these people is also a very important one. And I hope you can build that into your programs. I know the incentives would be there in terms of their, let's say, their career successes. If they're in these areas, they're likely to succeed. On the other hand, they also might end up doing high-frequency trading on Wall Street, right? And so there's, in some ways, I don't want to say we'd have to put a environmental health or public health litmus test into admitting those people to our training programs, but I do think that you run a risk that's we've seen with a lot of our students who get very well trained in data science as they go to fields outside of environmental health.
Bob, and then Jose.
So I was struck by what Ken said earlier about the need for an ontology. And ontology is not cool. Machine learning is cool. AI is cool. So that's what the data scientists go into. And so what role does NIHS, NIH broadly, and even the greater research community, maybe building partnerships with EU, which is now starting to look at exposome, what role do we have in actually creating that ontology? Because I don't think it's going to happen organically. I think it's going to have to be driven centrally.
Do you have any suggestions to answer your own question?
If there was an organization that got federal money to fund environmental health research that was based in North Carolina, and it could direct and build partnerships with, say, the National Library of Medicine and other research organizations to start to build that ontology, I think it would work. I don't think the extramural community can do it.
Does there a role for the societies, SOT, ISEE, whatever, in helping? I'm thinking we have our broad topic range, which we've talked about several times. How do we encapsulate on that?
Well, to be honest, I'd like to learn from what genomics did, because I don't think we have to completely reinvent the wheel. I think, however, I don't know how gene ontology got started, how it's funded, and how partnerships were built.
So just bear in mind, I have a very biased sample, but interestingly, most of the ontologies that I can think of, whether it's the gene ontology or the phenotype ontologies for mammalian and human, the anatomical ontologies, these all came from extramural support. They started with R01 grants, and then they went into larger resource grants. And I can't think of maybe one instance among those where a society played a convening role. Typically, it's about the passion of a small number of scientists that recognize the problem. Typically, because this goes back to, forgive me, I think it was Michelle's comment about use cases, your EUCs, your use cases where you're going after real world problems, but you have to solve data science issues to go after those real world problems. I think, Bob, that's driven a lot of the ontology development.
So this is something that I was part of the BD2K standards efforts, and we heard again and again that standards development usually happened close to a project. It was volunteer time, a small, dedicated, passionate group working on weekends to develop and implement that ontology for that particular project. And when that project was over, there wasn't the resources to maintain or carry that forward. And, you know, as a, it's ontologies are a resource, and NIH, oftentimes that's not a good fit for an R01. So there was a lot of discussion. We had a particular RFA to develop, community-based standards. It's tough. One, there's a very small number of people that can do the work well. And two, funding is a real issue. So I would, Gwen?
So if I could recollect, like when the Human Genome Program started and new technologies were beginning in metabolomics or proteomics, people said at that point in time, we need to name names, we need to develop a structure of how we're going to call the outputs. We didn't have 20,000 genes. Somebody had to come up with a convention on how to name them and when to do it. So if we had if those communities had just let people do cowboy naming, then 20 years later, they'd be standing back and going, oh my God, we're so far out, how are we gonna fix this? And I sort of feel like that's where we are. About 10 years or more, maybe 15 years ago, we went to some societies and we said, the future is sharing. We're here to tell you what the futures might be like. Are you open to thinking about these things? And there was some resistance to that, and we didn't push. We didn't say we were going to come down and say, you had to do it one way or the other. So it's a combination. There are some ontologies, right? The HERE program has developed an ontology. So to me, it's how can we incentivize the adoption of that? Or how can we create demonstration projects that are outside of HERE to get other researchers to adopt that? And then build upon that, in a community-based way. To refine it, to develop it, to bring in the toxicology science that would match up with the ontology of the human data and the biomonitoring data. I think we're at this point, like if we don't do that, like all these other efforts just aren't going to get us to where we need to go. So I would love to hear some advice about, how we start now, looking back, knowing what we have developed, what's out there, and how to help us develop how to get to where we want to go. Because I think we all know where we want to go. And I do think that there's an opportunity for the next generation of scientists to get on board and do this, right? That the other groups, whatever studies are out there, they can't adopt a new ontology. We're going to have to harmonize around what's already there. But some point going forward, we can all as a community say, we're going to do it a similar way. To say we're going to do it the same way is unrealistic, I think. But we're going to reduce the variation in how we do things so that when we are sharing data, because we're going to share data, but why should every group have to reharmonize and readopt standards and create something else and do it 100 more times? So I think the opportunity is sort of within this conversation. And if you could give us some guidance on how you think that we could progress in there, that would be something that would be very helpful.
So, Ken, did you want to respond to the ontology, and then I'm going to come back to Jose?
Yeah, I just say that I think one of the most valuable things that NIEHS could be doing, you're already doing, and that is that you're mounting these ontology workshops. That's critical. And it'd be great if SOT or other professional society were doing that, and perhaps it is, I'm just less aware of it, but that's one of your role as convener is really, really important in that. And I think you've demonstrated this afternoon that you're ready to go beyond just funding those workshops, and also fund pilot grants to get these ontologies off the ground. And maybe you just need to connect those two statements more explicitly to the community. If you come to this workshop, we expect that we will fund pilot projects coming out of that work.
Okay, Jose, come back to you.
Yeah, Ken, I'll talk to you about it later on because that's a great idea for a symposium at either the International Congress or there's a Congress of Toxicology for developing countries, and that would be a great place, to present this. This is a great discussion, but the part that I think we haven't addressed is cybersecurity as it relates to data and data storage in the cloud or whatever. And also something that I want to mention is that we at my institution, and I assume some of you folks at other institutions, we're getting messages almost on a monthly basis about protection of intellectual property and how we need to disclose foreign relationships, etc. So I assume with data sharing and data storage, cybersecurity, of course, it's something that has to be at the forefront of this effort here. I don't have an answer, so.
I want to give everyone on the WebEx a chance. Shukme, if you had anything you'd like to say, or anybody else on the WebEx, please chime in.
Sorry. I have a few questions for the group. I think most of us, or maybe all of us, have had experience working collaboratively to develop data as a resource that's meant to be broadly accessed. All right, we got that. And that gets all the attention, right? Most of what NIEHS supports are investigator-initiated projects where you're generating really important, impactful data, but the size of those data sets were maybe small to medium. Charles talked about like this cost-value judgment, right? So the question to you is, for those of you who are generating those kinds of data sets, how do you think about their utility for sharing and their feasibility? Anyone? Terry?
It seems to me, at least for my own research and for a lot of the work that goes in our core center, they're small to medium data sets, you're right. And this does go back to Jose's point about intellectual property and sharing and the competitiveness, I guess you'd say, of investigators, R01s. And I think it's critical that the metadata be, in some ways, your natural language processing or something, be very finely tuned to those kinds of smaller data sets so that people can take advantage of them. It seems like, if you do some genetic knockout or, and then do a microarrays or RNA-seq on particular organs with only a couple of doses of chemical, most people would say, well, that's not comprehensive enough to say anything. On the other hand, if there's a bunch of other related studies going on, and the metadata is there to support integration, you can get a lot out of those things. So I'd say that's another area that is really, I think, needs to be addressed is the whole notion of metadata and natural language processing so that people can take advantage of it without having to go through all this work to try and figure out what's going on. And that comes down to standards and ontologies to make sure that you know what you're putting into the database to make it most useful for everyone.
And yeah, to add to Terry, I think part of it is, sharing your data with somebody that you know is going to be a good steward of that data, somebody that you have a relationship with, and someone that you know will give great utility to the data. And there are examples within the toxicology community that we share things, data, and they analyze it in different ways. So it's just that trust element of who you share your data with.
So how do you capture the characteristics that would make you trust a data set? And an example I have, many years ago, before we were in the planning stages for developing this database for autism research, and we brought together some leading autism researchers, clinicians, there were some epidemiologists as well. None of them wanted to use anyone else's data. It was pretty discouraging, and it was this, well, if it's not my data set, I don't know the ins and outs, I don't know enough of the context. I think more so than just, the trust that the person was generating reliable data. So the question is there, can we think about metadata or elaborating metadata enough to provide the context that would, do what would, you trust data from this lab, but you trust them because, how can you incorporate that into metadata? So everything is there. You know exactly how those data were collected and so on. Lynn, and then Marla, or Marla and Marla.
No, I'm an outsider. So I'm looking at this conversation from the outside. And it's very funny to me because this whole conversation is happening as if the research was not conducted in a competitive manner. Mm-hmm. We all compete for funding. We all compete for who published the paper first. And there's no incentive whatsoever to share anything. So the issue is not an IT issue. It's a cultural issue. It's a structural issue. So instead of focusing on bringing IT personnel, we should be bringing community psychologists and political scientists.
Yeah. That's a great question. Personally, I think there has been some warming of the climate around data sharing in, I would say, the last 15 years. We, as Gwen mentioned, we have heard a lot of pushback for, good reasons in terms of, data or currency by which I get tenure, my graduate student get fed, and so on, and you're asking me to kind of give away that value. And I've seen much more willingness or openness to consider it. I'm interested if that's been others' experiences, or if not, how do we promote that? Lynn?
See, I think what you're describing is part of the reason there does need to be more training in data science, for the environmental health community more generally. And I agree with an earlier comment, everybody's not going to become a data scientist, but what you're describing, that is the craft that people learn, currently. That I know what I know because I know every detail of how my questionnaire was designed and every data collection methodology that I used in every lab that I used and blah, 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 blah. And I trust data because I know all of that. And most people are not aware of other ways to ascertain that data are valid, have been collected in a reliable fashion. And that's just because that's not been incorporated in the way that most people have been trained. And so I think that, some of the things that you're already doing, if it is possible, to be able to move, as Gwen said, to a little bit more standardization about how these data are handled. That's the kind of thing that can provide you with the same level of assurance. But two, people are not going to be reassured by that if they don't understand it, if they don't understand how it works, if they don't understand how to read metadata, if they don't understand how to use data that have been generated elsewhere. But that everybody's probably not going to do that overnight either. So I think establishing the tools and the resources and and requiring even that data be placed in repositories over time will build investigators who are capable of using each other's data. It'll happen. And people will compete for grants to do that. They'll still be competing for grants, so we won't solve that problem, but that's okay. The thing that's so difficult, I think, is that, and again, as Gwen said, we really are behind the times in environmental health compared with other areas. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that there have been, prior efforts, like the Phoenix, I worked on Phoenix, that have tried, to create standardized ways, of putting environmental data or, assessing the exposome in studies, recording that. But they really have been kind of like environment light, LITE approaches that don't reflect the best of environmental science. And I think that we haven't really done a great job on our end and making the tools that we would think people should be using accessible more broadly, like to geneticists, who should be collecting more exposure information. So I think that's another piece of this to consider, which I didn't see very much, on the slides, but I think it's very important.
Rick.
Actually, if we work on the premise that you get what you reward, what suggestions would you make to NAEHS to what is it we can be doing to reward the types of behaviors that will ultimately facilitate the seamless sharing of data? One thing I can think of is that there should be more discussion up front, bringing environmental scientists and data scientists together to figure out how are we going to collect the data so everyone, if you independently do your experiments, you're going to generate data that is seamlessly integratable, that has a set of quality control parameters that gives us all the reassurance that this is going to be quality stuff that you're going to be dumping together. We're going to feel good about sharing and using. But what is it we can be doing specifically to reward the types of behaviors that we want to see happen? Ken?
So we heard from Dr. Jorgensen earlier that in the future we might expect that most grant applications will have a data management plan or a data sharing plan. There's no reason why you couldn't, here and now, require your grant applicants to talk about their past data sharing activities. And you make that a criteria, incentive in the review process, that for two proposals that are otherwise equal, the investigator that has a consistent record of figuring out how to distribute the data and make it available is the one that you want to reward. Just an example.
But how do you deal with the cases where you have, say, 5 different strong personalities who have a strong history of making their data available, but is sufficiently heterogeneous in nature that it would make it very complicated to seamlessly knit this together? Yeah, and it's really getting at the sociological, the psychological, whatever you want to call it, issues. We have to change fundamentally the sociology and the psychology of how we share information and work collaboratively together.
If I can add something, from the sociological standpoint, I will agree with Robert. We are talking about a common property resource here. And in a competitive environment, each individual don't have incentives to, proactively contribute to the common good. So usually the entity that takes the responsibility of keeping that common good is the state, is a centralized entity. So in this particular example, I would agree that NAEHS will have to take the responsibility of creating that system to be able to make each data set to speak to each other and be comparable in that way.
Okay, Kim, I think wants to talk, and then I'll go to Jose.
Is this on?
And then to Robin.
So it just seems like there's still different camps here talking about different things. So heterogeneity is what we deal with in population studies. That kind of makes environmental science us pretty unique compared to other agencies. So we're not going to get heterogeneity or homogeneity across our populations. So it's context specific, but if there was like a limited common data set that and this sounds very ECHO-ish for those in ECHO, but we talk about it all the time, the minimum requirement of common elements, that would be a game changer for at least the population-based science, which is very different than what it would be in the genomic world or in the zebrafish world and everywhere else. But what are the common platforms or common vocabulary that we use across those disciplines? And I haven't heard much discussion on that, except each discipline discussing their own. But
I think Jose, and then Robin, did you? Okay.
Yeah, Rick, in terms of your question, really there is very little experience, but there is an ongoing event that actually could shed some more information, and is all the ECHO cohorts. We are actually having to share extant data, and it hasn't been very easy at all. And part of it is precisely because people do collect data in different ways. And I think you had that experience. And, but perhaps looking at what works and what doesn't work from ECHO can give us some important insights on where incentives can be placed to support and then increase data sharing.
Robin?
I kind of get to Marla's point in terms of a sociological change. So I think folks who've been in this field for a long time, this isn't a new problem. So, I mean, if anyone's tried to get a reagent that you say you're supposed to share, we know it doesn't happen. So I think the question is, why doesn't it happen? Is it because they don't have it? They are not willing to share because of competitive, or they don't know how? So maybe one possibility to see, are we getting better, is not that you want to have the police, but a reporting function. Honestly, when you're a user or try to be a reusable of information that's out there and you can't get it, at least the granting agency might become aware of it. And you start getting these collection hits on your profile that maybe would elicit a conversation from a funding agency. Just an idea.
Or encourage an individual when they're submitting a grant to list specifically the number of instances where they have shared information. So up front, it's requiring that. So again, it's you get what you reward, or you ask for.
Terry?
Yeah, so we had an experience a number of years ago in the nanotechnology, nanotoxicology, where we had some strong personalities and people, weren't, but one of the requirements to participate in that, and it was said right up front in the announcement for the RFA, is that you will share. And not only that, but we had this, and then we worked through IP and all that kind of stuff with our individual institutions to make sure that people went over that barrier. And then we also had the deposition of the data in the SEBS database or at least a subsection of the SEBS database for that, which worked pretty well, I think. And metadata was kind of cool. Very complicated, but I think one of the things that was also apparent was that when people decided to put that data in there, we had an understanding of embargo a short embargo time so that people could take advantage of not only seeing their data, but their data in the context of all the rest of the data. And if you were going to publish anything, you had to publish together with other groups. That seemed to work as a pretty good model.
Lynn and then Sue.
Did you have your hand up? Oh, no, you didn't. I thought you did. Well, so one thing that's motivating is publication in EHP. You know, it is the highest impact environmental health journal in the world, right? Maybe the universe, for all we know. So I can claim that because no one can refute it. But, you know, making data public, or at least archiving data, or at least making metadata public, but policies like that will motivate people. And so, you know, that's just, you know, I think, yeah, allowing people to allow for the costs of some of that in their grants, but, you know, we start getting into what I worry about, and I think what has been non-motivating is that if there's a perception by investigators that they will have funding for that instead of doing their research, they're not going to want to do it. So that is a negative that I wanted to mention. Just like another cost of publication that's you have to dump into your grant application. So I do think that that has been a factor that has not been motivating.
Sue?
I was just going to bring up another thing which we haven't talked about. We've talked about the sort of the individual barriers to sharing data, but I think we have some institutional barriers to overcome as well. I mean, we've become experienced with this, as Jose said, through ECHO, and we're trying to share data with ECHO writ large, but also with smaller collaborative groups that we've formed within ECHO. And at least at our institution, I almost feel like I need a full-time person to work on data use agreements and material transfer use agreements, because our institution requires something like that to share every tiny little bit of data or sample or whatever that you might want. So those are some barriers that we might need to think about in terms of making this more efficient and more doable for people as well.
Along the lines of institutional impediments, you know, Terry, you mentioned that you know, for the Nano Consortium, you were able to work through the the IP issues. Those can actually be real impediments. To what extent are you finding that that's a serious impediment at your organizations? Clearly, the University of Washington worked through this, but tell me more.
So this had to actually go to the State Attorney General's office.
Yes,
because
it's a real
state
impediment.
Institution. So it was, but on the other hand, they understood that the advantage to the university to do this was to, in fact, at the same time they could guarantee IP and royalties, they would accelerate the research, and actually it would be a repeating positive, net positive for the research community to be able to do this. We're progressive. I don't know. I think that's just how we deal with IP at University of Washington.
What about other places? How about
Marla?
UConn?
Wait.
Go ahead.
Wait. Jose and then Marla?
Okay.
Or
well, let me just give you a recent example. I'm doing the Zika and environmental study. Just to get everyone agreed the samples would be shared. There was no problem with that. But it took us nearly 3 months to get all the material transfer documents. And when we thought we were done, said, oh, well, you had some samples transferred from Puerto Rico to Georgia, so you need to have another separate one for there. And so it could be very complicated, the whole intellectual property sharing. So somehow that's one area that needs to be addressed.
Marla?
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm getting all confused here. I don't know exactly what are we talking about, if we are talking about sharing or we are talking about the creation of that ontology that it was referring to and we have been talking about, because sharing is not the same thing as creating a common structure for the data to be able to speak to each other. So just for my peace of mind, can we keep those two separate?
Sure, I agree that they're different, but I think they are very much related, right? So if the field had an ontology that the community bought into and everybody was using the same structure, the concept of sharing or using other data or doing meta-analyses, combining data sets would be enhanced.
Right.
But sharing is a human behavior, right? It's two people deciding that they're going to share something. But another way to share data is to put data in a central repository in order to enable other people to use it. So the definitions of sharing can be multiple.
Lynn, and then I'll come back to.
So the IP
Racina.
issues we're talking about all the time, because when I job Dean, a couple of times a week, I'm asked by our research office to look at an agreement that one of my faculty members wants to enter into, and where there's something about, the product that the funder wants to have something to do with. And sometimes it's a funder who wants to own the data itself, but often it's more like, well, no, it's a joint ownership kind of thing, that they have the right to use the data too. CMS does that all the time, other agencies do that all the time. And these things raise a lot of issues, but, I think we're also aware that, ever since the Shelby Amendment, that if the federal government is funding the research, that the data are somehow accessible via FOIA, so not everybody is explicitly, confronting that all the time, but if you've ever had to confront that, then you're very aware of it, because that's real, So we don't truly own it 100%. I think, by definition, given that amendment and the OMB regulations around that, and you guys' responsibility for carrying those through. I think that the real issue for the institutions is whether or not, two things, whether or not there's speed bumps to access, and whether, others have access to your data right away and can publish it before you can, which wouldn't be fair. I don't think anybody thinks that would be fair. But the other piece of that is can just anybody enter that data space and grab the data? There probably are data that just anybody should be able to go in and get. But, I think in addition to speed bumps, to have, some, and this gets back to that trust thing, not just I trust you because I know you and I like to work with you, but that if you want to use my data, you have a way of coming in to apply for it, and that I'm sure that it's a legitimate scientific purpose, and that you understand, that what you're proposing to do is reasonable. The problem with that being that there are investigators who do use that to just prevent anybody else, from ever accessing the data. So I think that there's, there has to be a process though, but I don't know what's the right way to govern that so that it's done, fairly and equitably, and doesn't take too much time, again, for the PIs who are doing their own research as well.
Okay, I'm going to get maybe the last comment. Irasima, we are at 5 o'clock, so.
I'll be quick. There is a model that you might want to look at, and it's called the ICPSR at University of Michigan. They have all kinds of political and social science data that is available. They have workshops, they curate data, and it's accessible, and it's a good model I think you might want to look at. And basically anyone can use that data, and they give you the parameters of the data gathering, when it was, for the sample, when it was gathered. And I think it's a good model that you might want to look at. It's called ICPSR, which is the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Science Research.
Okay. It's 5 o'clock.
We are at the end of our time, but I mean, if we have more, we don't have to stop now. If we have more questions, more comments, we certainly want to make sure everyone gets heard. Yeah, Edith?
Just one comment, and it may not be a good parallel, but I mean, if you would have told me in 1995 or 96 that I would hear Brenda Eskenazi say that CBPR is the best thing since sliced bread, I wouldn't have believed it. And I think she wouldn't have believed it, but she did, acknowledge in one of our meetings that you required it, and she started doing it, and along the way, lo and behold. Now, I know that the data thing has all kinds of complications, but back then, people were saying listening to community members has all kinds of complications, and it cannot be done. So, you know, I think we've heard a lot about requiring it, and then the culture changed, the education, you know, of really exposing everybody to data science. I kind of agree with Brad. Not everybody will be the data scientist, but they'll at least understand. And I was just at a meeting around data science when the biostatistician said, well, the data science people have no hypothesis. They do kind of data drudging. So we got to get over that by getting everybody in the room. But, you know, I feel like that requiring it and doing all these steps, so it's going to pay off. So
I'll check one more time. Anyone on the WebEx want to weigh in? One last comment before we wrap up. Hearing none, I will just thank everyone who's participated, the ERT staff, our panelists, Charles from Intramural, and for you for your insightful comments. We knew we hired the right people for this job.